We are your home theater and AV questions answered. This is AVRant. Want your home theater or AV question answered by Tom and Rob? Send it to question@avrant.com. Welcome to another edition of AVRant. I'm Tom Andrew, and I'm here with
Rob H. This is AVRant. It's your home theater and AV questions answered, and welcome to the first show we're actually recording in 2022. We are here in a new year, and CES is underway, but we have only seen some of the pre-CES stuff. I was actually on Twitter just before we started recording this podcast, and there were some new things announced, but that's not on the show notes. That's not going in there with 12 minutes of notice. So next week we'll be talking about whatever CES stuff we find interesting, just so you have the heads up and know that this isn't really the CES episode just yet.
Gonna be a lot of displays. I think.
Well, yeah.
I think that's
typically what's there.
Yeah, what's going to come out of that.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I don't even know who's actually there anymore, or
Sony.
Once they get there, they'll ever be able to leave. Maybe they just live in Las Vegas from this point on.
Right.
For some people, wouldn't be a bad thing.
Yeah, in person, it's Sony. Everybody else is not on the show floor.
Yes, 2022. So if you have an MP3 tag editor, you might have to go in and change the year to 2022 if I don't remember to do it in the tags myself. Because if not, and you sort by year, you might end up in the wrong year.
Show up at the beginning of the list of last year's episodes. Let's hope.
Let's hope Tom gets it right this time. I don't know. It's a 50-50 shot there. All right, this is AVRant, the podcast that answers your home theater and AV questions. Get your questions answered. All you have to do is ask. You ask by emailing us at question@avrant.com. Go to avrant.com and click on the Buy Us a Cup of Coffee link. What am I doing? How did I get there? Am I supposed to do that?
No. You said something about avrant.com. That sort of dipped into financial support and listeners of the week, which we're not there yet.
I don't know how. We're not there yet. No.
So we're starting off the year. It's all good.
That's right. It's all good. Tom's a little still. You see, what happened was usually we start this podcast, like we get on the Skype call and then we immediately start the
Pretty
podcast.
close, yeah.
But today we spent about 10 minutes sort of talking about our weeks together, him and I. So I've already started the podcast in my head. So this is all Rob's fault. That's the way I
Sure. Absolutely. I asked all the questions, started all the conversation.
That was me. That had nothing to do with me. I was just sitting here minding my own business, and there you are peppering me with questions as you often do.
That's right.
If you guys can't tell, I am joking. Rob never
Tom
talks
started
to me.
off by asking me a question.
Barely tolerates me.
Yeah, I got a couple of sentences in, and then we somehow started talking about Tom. I don't know how that happened either.
I don't. I'm the more interesting one, Rob. I think that we can all.
I won't contest
up there
that.
in Canada doing Canadian things. I don't know, hunting moose, whatever you do up there. Who knows?
Mostly keep to myself right now. That's for darn sure.
All right, get your question answered. Email us at question@avrant.com.
That's right.
You can go to facebook.com/avrantpodcast, youtube.com/avrant. Email us directly. Rob@avrant.com. His Twitter is @firstreflect. I'm Tom @avrant.com. My Twitter handle is @avrant_Tom. I don't know. I don't know what's wrong with my brain today, Rob.
First time saying
not
this
working.
stuff. That's what's going on.
It's the first time. I'm going to have to, I don't know, I'd go back to the drawing board, do some more vocal warm-ups, maybe go over my lines. I clearly haven't memorized them in the 13 years we've been doing this.
So much prep and practice we do every week on the show notes.
All right, we're going to thank our listeners of the week finally. I don't know, I already started doing that, but we're going to thank our listeners. When you come to Listener of the Week, you support us in some way. One of the ways you can do that is going to avrant.com, click on the Buy Us a Cup of Coffee link, and send us a PayPal donation through your PayPal account or through a credit card. So we want to thank Chris for doing that this week. Thank you very much, Chris, our first donor of the year.
Yes, indeed, Chris. Thank you very much for the PayPal donation. We appreciate the financial support.
Yeah, Patreon adjusted the number of people who are actually our patrons because it's the beginning of the month. So we went down from 137 to 133.
Yep, some people's credit cards expired.
Uh-oh. Y'all better get out there. So but we still have 133 patrons,
We
I'm
do.
very happy about, including Terry, who's a member of the 2 Hour Plus Club, Bertrand, and Chris. So thank you to our 133 patrons over at patreon.com.
Yep, that's patreon.com/AVRant podcast. If you'd like to sign up, it's an automatic monthly donation. Think of it as a voluntary subscription, if you please. So big thank you to our 133 patrons, Terry, Bertrand, and Chris H, because we've got multiple Chris's this week. So I put in the Chris H for this particular one. Thank you for being 3 of our patrons.
Yeah, the donor, the PayPal donation was not from a Chris H.
That's
I
right.
did check their last name.
Yeah.
It's a different Chris. I will say, I think the problem is that light is too close to me, and it's like throwing me off. It's a little too bright in my face. So if I look weird on the YouTubes, for those of you that watch us on the YouTubes, I'm sorry. I don't know what happened over there. That thing's way too close to me. But if you can't support us financially, we understand. Just support us in some way and tell us what you do or did, and we will mention you. So, Chris, this is maybe a third Chris. I don't really know.
I think it was the PayPal Chris and not the
Could be
Patreon Chris. I'm pretty sure.
There we go.
Pretty sure.
That's right. This Chris maybe is one of the people who says, "Hey, they saved me money or sent me in the right direction. Let me give some of my extra dough that I have lying around because of them to us."
Maybe
maybe that's what happened. Chris brought a screen from Seymour AV. They were awesome and helpful. Yes. The guy who owns Seymour AV is named Chris as well. So maybe it's him. Could be him.
I don't think that's how this one went.
I don't think that's how that worked. Yes, but yeah, Chris Seymour over at Seymour AV is a nice guy. I like him. He dropped our name. This Chris dropped our name to them. He also got a new HDMI cable from Monoprice and was very glad to have in-wall conduit. And since we mentioned it, he looked up what Opal players like his are selling these days on eBay, which he says is tempting.
Yeah.
Probably to sell
Yes.
because they are ridiculous.
Yup.
It bothers me that there are things like Harmony remotes and Oppo players that people will still pay top dollar for, and yet the companies who make them go, I don't know. I don't really see a demand.
Yeah, well, it's for a very specific niche crowd. It's not the gigantic mass demand
But
that they
just
need.
think what Oppo would have come out with for Ultra HD.
I know, right?
All this stuff.
Well.
I mean, they had players that solved problems. The thing about Oppo players that were great in most of the instances, especially the Blu-ray player that they came out with, was that they were a great like stopgap fix-all for in between.
Yeah.
As you were going in between an older receiver to a newer projector or vice versa, it solved a bunch of problems.
I mean, if anyone would have had a player that did frame-by-frame dynamic tone mapping of its own, it would have been Oppo. I would have put my chips in on
It would
that.
have been Oppo.
And if anyone would have taken advantage of the new source-based tone mapping to allow for that, it's like it would have been Oppo. But anyway, we lament.
Yeah, we lament. James sent some photos to me with permission to use them on AV Gadgets, which I don't know that he could give me that permission.
Well,
but
yeah,
he did find them.
Right. He found them.
He found them. So what he did is he used the Wayback Machine to find some Dolby Diagrams from 2001 that show slightly elevated surround speakers aimed directly at one another, not angled toward the seats, and surround back speakers aimed straight forward, not toed in, and the front left right speakers also aimed straight forward. And he sent me all those things, and I immediately added them to the article that has me complaining about the diagrams that Dolby puts out now, which are ridiculous. And these are so much better, even though one of the rooms looks like a literal closet. But for the most part, these are so much better than what they put out now. So clearly they had the capabilities of doing it right. They just went,
Yeah. There's a full PDF from 2001 that I'll find a way to host somewhere, and we'll have a link to it in the show notes.
I think I hosted it on AV Gadgets.
Oh, okay.
If you go to my, I think I put it up there.
Oh, okay.
So you might be able to link
that would work
to it from there. So I'll try to find that while we're talking.
Oh, that's okay. I know where it is.
We also got some notes of gratitude for keeping the podcast going during this clearly worsening pandemic
it is
again.
Right now, yes.
Okay.
Definitely.
Last week I was optimistically thinking that maybe it wouldn't be worsening, but the numbers, for those of you that are listening to us in the future, this is during the Omicron surge of 2022, 2021, or whatever they're going to end up calling this thing. So it's like everyone I know is sick.
Ugh.
It's insane.
And
So
he said it publicly, so we can wish DJ well in a speedy recovery, because he
DJ's
put it out on his
Rona, too.
podcast. He got stricken with it, and his voice sounded rough. He got the exceedingly sore throat, scratchy voice version of it. So he hopefully he didn't feel as rough as he sounded. He was like,
right.
but
Right.
yeah, clearly that symptom, if nothing else. So
Right.
wishing DJ a speedy recovery for sure.
Yes, DJ, and this will be the one and only time your name will be mentioned where I will not say immediately something mean about you afterwards. So, speedy recovery. All the best from us at AVRant, and we'll hopefully you'll be back in the saddle talking about movies and saying things that aren't correct about them very, very soon. So, notes of gratitude for keeping the podcast going from Brandon, James, Martin, Eric, Terry, Andy, who's a member of the 2 Hour Plus Club, and he says be safe and vigilant. We are trying. Chris, who says he always learns something every show. Mark, another member of the 2 Hour Plus Club, and Bertrand. So we've got Brendan, James, Martin, Eric, Terry, Andy, Chris, Mark, and Bertrand. So thank you very much for thanking us.
You'll hear the names one more time from my lips. Brandon, James, Martin, Eric, Terry, Andy, Chris, Mark, and Bertrand. Thank you all very much for sending in those notes of gratitude and encouragement to us. They are definitely appreciated.
They
are. A big thank you to everybody who continues to listen. Welcome to a whole new year of AV Rant. Next verse, same as the first. It's not going to be a lot of changes around here.
Right. All right. In the news this week, we've got, of course, some pre-CES 2022 news. We'll be covering all of it, all the interesting stuff starting next week. But this is what we know of so far. We've got LG. A week ago, they announced that behind the scenes over at LG Display, which develops technology that eventually gets sold by LG Electronics, as well as other brands, they have a new OLED.EX.
OLED.EX. Don't forget the dot in there.
There's a dot?
There's a dot. It's OLED.EX. I
guess I have to go back and edit that article. No one told me about the dot. Anyways, I didn't write that article. OLED.EX technology that should allow OLED TVs to be lighter in weight and up to 30% brighter. They talk about using heavy hydrogen, or you would maybe know it as deuterium.
Deuterium.
Deuterium. I know that wasn't right with the rhonium. But anyways. But that was already being used in last year's OLED Evo panels, which claim to be up to 20% brighter. So we got 10 more percent. So OLED.EX claims to be a whole process. The .EX stands for Evolution Experience, which is a terrible acronym for what they say it is. And also involves new chassis materials and machine learning to help boost pixel output even further. So we have an article over at AV Gadgets, which apparently doesn't have the dot in there.
That's right.
I'll have to go back and
editing time.
Editing time. Andrew, you're the one who wrote that. You missed the dot.
I mean, all the other places that wrote it up did as well, but I noticed, and then they even made the dot red in one of their photos. They're like, "There's a dot in there." It's OLED.EX. They're not even using it for marketing purposes.
I will be honest with you. I might not fix it just on general principle.
Yeah.
I just think it's a stupid dot. I don't like it. At LG's pre-CES event held at their own new headquarters in New Jersey, that's COVID related to, or relational to where DJ lives, I think. I don't think he actually lives in New Jersey, but for whatever reason, I think I look at DJ and think that's a man who lives in New Jersey.
Isn't he just outside of Boston? I mean, I'm going by the accent that he's Boston
I don't know.
area.
I think he's from New Jersey. I'm pretty sure. Anyways, they don't seem to be using the OLED.EX for any consumer marketing purposes. Instead, they're sticking to their OLED Evo, and the new C2 series has it. It was exclusive to the G1 series last year. So maybe the OLED.EX, which is one letter away from being a thing that you're not going to click on if you see it in an email, is how they're manufacturing the Evo panels now or something, and that they're actually never going to be called EX.
Yeah, I don't think they are.
For the home. They're going to be called Evos.
No, there's a thing when we get to the new Gallery series, the new G2 series, that seems to be the marketing name for all the OLED.EX technological advancements. So we'll get there.
Anyways, there's a new 42-inch size in the C2 series aimed at gamers. The other C2 sizes are 48, 55, 65, 77, and 83 inches.
Yeah.
They're also using carbon fiber to reduce the weight by over 40%, which really, really got the bikers, all the cyclists, really excited. Carbon fiber, oh my God, it's so much lighter and stronger. And now I can cycle so much faster. Had somebody tell me today that I needed wider tires so I could go faster. I'm like, the tires are not the problem. I'll go, well, physics say that you'll actually go fast. I'm like, yeah, physics might say that, but my legs are going to tell you that this is as fast as I can go. The A2 series remains the entry level for OLED with 60 hertz panels and no EVO label. So the A2 gets 48 inches, 55, 65, and 77 inch sizes. The G2 series gets the most upgrades. Not only do they have the EVO panels, they also get a brightness booster.
And that seems to be where this whole .EX thing comes in.
Okay, so we think that the Evo brightness booster, which very much sounds like a protein shake sold to like dude bros with no shirts on at the gym, which is a heat sink to dissipate heat even faster, similar to what the Sony A90J series had last year and Panasonic flagships OLEDs have had for 2 years now. They're also even thinner and lighter, and again, that's a good thanks to carbon fiber. Dude, it's also more aerodynamic, in case you're wondering. And that's allowed the G2 series to now include an 83-inch size and the brand new 97-inch size. That's got to be cheap. Do we know what the price of that 97
no price announced yet. Nope.
I mean, 97 is definitely putting the projector world on notice. If you can buy a 97-inch panel, I mean, that's literally bigger than the screen I have behind me right now. So yes, I would be very interested in that. Other updates include that user profiles for WebOS and full 48 gigabits per second bandwidth on all HDMI 2.1 inputs, even though nothing puts out greater than 40 gigabits right now anyways, but who cares? You need the 8 because reasons. And a new feature exclusive to 2022 models, where you can wirelessly send the signal from a source that's plugged into one LG TV to a second LG TV on the same Wi-Fi network. No price is announced yet, and the shipping time frame is spring.
That's right.
What are you sending? So you can send like the 4K video from one to another over Wi-Fi?
I mean, they use the example of a cable box. You've got a cable box that's plugged into a television in your living room. You want to go watch that same cable box in your bedroom. You don't have a second cable box. You can send the signal from the TV in your living room to the TV in your bedroom, as long as both TVs are connected to the same Wi-Fi. I don't know if it's going to work for, higher resolutions and frame rates and all that stuff. But anyway, they just mentioned it.
I mean, it is not the cheapest solution for getting content from one TV to another TV by buying brand new TVs for all over your house. But if you have to have more than one TV and you end up with two of these, then I mean that would be convenient. Yeah, because the cable company absolutely. I feel like it's a matter of principle to not pay the cable company an extra fee for a second box. I'd rather pick the box up and unplug it all and take it to another room than have to pay them. So anyways, there's some links we'll have for some of this stuff. All right, Samsung. First, some journalists have seen Samsung's QD display TVs behind closed doors under NDA, but why would they not talk about it? But they decide not to publicly show or officially announce them just yet. Somewhat humorously, they still won the CES 2022 Innovation Award, but we'll have to wait a bit longer to actually see this new QD-OLED technology, which means that they probably had like the last time I saw something like that, it was like the first 4K display ever. And it was, you could kind of tell that they had almost stapled the bezel onto. I mean, it was completely baling wired up together behind something so you couldn't touch it or get too close. But that's probably what
this was kind of supposed to be the big exciting thing to see at CES, and one there. Well, not other than behind closed doors, and some of that took place before CES. So we do know it exists. The awards that are handed out at CES are ridiculous because you just pay for them. as a brand, you just paid to get an award. So obviously Samsung did that ahead of time and had intended to show their QD displays, which is their name for QD-OLED, because they don't want to market OLED because they just spent the past 5 years trashing OLED. So they're calling it QD display. But anyway, wasn't actually publicly shown, wasn't officially announced. We do expect it'll still show up at some point in 2022, but there we go. Those 97-inch OLEDs that LG had, the very first journalist, which was from Digital Trends, he got a look at it, and they didn't have the 97-inch there. It was there later for journalists after him, but that's how down to the wire they were of getting a prototype 97-inch actually on display. So it happens a lot at CES.
So as far as official announcements from Samsung, there's the new 2022 Neo QLED lineup. Not a ton has changed. There are still 8K and 4K models. They still use mini LED backlights. They still range from 43 to 85 inches. They're touting 144 hertz refresh, though, which is better than 120. So
it's a bigger number.
It's
actually a remnant from 3D. That's where 144 came from. It's hilarious to me.
And they're finally getting more than one HDMI 2.1 input. All 4 ports will have HDMI 2.1 bandwidth. They also have their new HDR10 Plus gaming format to compete with Dolby Vision gaming. And they also finally get a Dolby Atmos decoding built in, but still no Dolby Vision because
Samsung.
Screw you guys.
That's right.
We don't go play with OLED or Dolby. You don't like it. You guys stupid. Don't like it.
Yep.
When companies act like small children, like the whole YouTube, Amazon, Apple TV,
Roku thing,
Roku, all that stuff. I'm just like, all right, guys. I'm going to make you go back into your room and deal with this. And no one's coming out until you guys work this thing out. That's the way I feel. I mean, they act like children. So on the micro LED front, Samsung introduced the new 89, 101, and 110-inch prefabricated sizes that will be available globally. So micro LED.
Yep.
So 89's, doable.
Yeah.
But it's prefab, which means it's going to be one big panel, right?
Yeah,
it's modular.
It's actually still the modular panels, but put onto one solid backplane, and you can't remove any of the modules. So there's still seams if you get up close. There's still seams in between the modules. That's a real
question. Yeah. I have a feeling that's going to be those seams are going to be the issue. Once they can get those small enough, then we'll see.
Mm-hmm.
And lastly, for JVC, they've given a heads up that prices on all the 8K E-Shift and 8K E-Shift X laser models will be going up on February 1st, thanks to Lance for the heads up on that. Whoever Lance is, one of our listeners, I guess. It appears there'll be a $1,000 price increase in all 3 models of the NZ7, 8, and 9, which is also the RS21, 31, and 4100 projectors.
Yep.
Just different models.
From the JVC Pro lineup.
But the big thing is that they announced a DLA. I can never not put the N in there.
Because there is.
There is one, and they keep taking it out.
This is just DLA. Yeah.
The DLA-NP5. So not the NZ or the NX. It's
or just N.
Or just N.
Because in Europe it was just N, and then in North America it was NX. Now this isn't NZ or NZ because it's not laser. This is NP5.
Right.
Also known as the RS1100, because if you're like, how come the new models start at RS2100? Here's why. They planned this all along.
They knew this was coming. So this is a lamp-based projector. I wrote this up yesterday very quickly when I got back from picking up my sons from their pole vaulting camp. It has so many similarities with the laser, the NZ7. Yeah. It's actually kind of scary. They use the same glass. It has the same motorized lens zoom and lens shift and memories and all that stuff. It has the dynamic frame by frame tone mapping. It has all that stuff.
Well, I mean, the NX5 did already. So
yeah,
this is a very small update in some regards. This does not get 8K E-shift.
No.
So they're not wobbling the panels, but it's genuine 4K resolution. It's 4096 by 2160 p resolution. So I mean, I'm fine with that.
2 HDMI 2.1 inputs with full bandwidth.
With 4K 120. That's really the big update here.
That's the thing.
That's
no 8K 60. It
No
can't
8K.
accept that signal, but it can accept and display the 4K.
4K 120 with HDMI 2.1 ports. So that's really the update there. Also got a spec bump up to 1900 lumens from 1800 lumens of the NX5.
That's a rounding error.
That's
all that is.
So
they have HDR10 plus port as well.
Yeah.
I mean, which is kind of what you expect. But $7,000.
Yeah. Which is $1,000 more than the NX5 used to be. So I mean, at least this one gets some feature updates for the extra $1,000. The other models are just going up by $1,000 from where they were before. So that means 11,000, 16,000, and what was the NZ9 already priced at? I can't remember. Wasn't it already 2,400 or 24,000?
Well,
so
I don't know.
25,000.
If you the press release for the MP5 had the NZ7 as an $11,000.
11,000.
Yeah, 10,999.
Yeah. But when it came out, it was 10,000.
Was it? Okay.
Yeah.
Then
so it's gone up $1,000.
Okay.
That's it. That's the news.
All right. That's what we know from CES so far. So I don't know. I mean, there's some things to get a little bit excited about, I think. There's some things to get excited about. But once we know pricing, we'll get more excited. Yeah. Maybe.
It very much a little bit of evolution, little bit of refinement type of year, it looks like.
Yeah. Right.
Nothing blowing the doors off yet.
Some comments from some of our listeners. Michael has 2 comments. He wrote this a couple of years ago when he noticed his TV was starting to have a greenish-yellow tint to it. Turns out he had a cataract developing in his eye. He had it removed, and now his TV looks fine again. Okay. We are never going to get that one right, Michael.
That one we did not guess. The TV cannot be blamed, and purchasing a new one would not have solved that issue. But, yeah, I mean, it's...
If you bought a really bad TV that had... whatever the anti-yellow tint is to it, they kind of balanced it out, maybe, I guess, theoretically.
But an interesting update. Thank you for letting us know.
I'll tell you what, I don't think we will ever on this podcast start saying things like, have you had your eyes checked? I think we have said it once.
Well, I think we said it for years. I think we've definitely said it for years at some point. Maybe not even in relation to directly to a question, but just in general, having your ears checked. Because I mean, just age related. Even if it's not hearing damage from something specific.
Well, if all these TikTok videos I see of people getting like hardened earwax taken out by doctors, I mean, I'm like. How did it get that bad? How did you not fix this? But whatever. So, second comment from Michael. He initially wrote us this week to ask if we could figure out why his subwoofer trim level was so strange. His theater area is open to the rest of his house. His current subs are a 10-inch ELAC and a 10-inch Polk, and had the volume dial set to about halfway. But his Denon S750H he got recently keeps setting the subwoofer trim level to -12. That didn't make any sense, but it turned out he was using the mic that came with his old receiver, and once he switched to the mic that came with the new one, it kind of fixed all that. So yes, this is another reminder that these mics are not interchangeable. You cannot just grab one from your old receiver, stick it with your new receiver, and assume it's going to work just fine.
So interesting updates. I like those because those are things you wouldn't necessarily think to troubleshoot and ask right off the bat. So I appreciate those updates, Michael.
All right, Jason heard Zach last week saying that his Denon X4300H won't pass through Dolby Vision from his NVIDIA Shield Pro. Jason says he also has a 4300H and a Shield Pro, and he's been able to watch Dolby Vision output with a Shield just fine.
Yeah.
So perhaps there are settings that could be adjusted, or maybe a firmware update that could be applied, but what he's basically saying is that keep trying. There's something going wrong here. We're not sure exactly what it is, but we will figure it out. You will figure it out.
I'm not able to confirm because I don't have an X4300H, and as I mentioned last week when answering it, like I've got a Marantz that would have been a pretty comparable model, but it was the year prior. So the 4300H is 1 year newer than the Marantz receiver that I have. So I really don't know what it might be in there. Certainly stranger things have happened than a firmware update coming out and having not been applied. And there were definitely firmware updates that were specifically to do with Dolby Vision for those models. So that is certainly a thing Zach could, that's easy to check. Just reconnect to the internet if it's not always connected to the internet, and double check if there's a firmware update. If it's not that, my guess would be that maybe, you know how there's video processing in the AV receiver? And I'm wondering if it could be either direction, right? Like having the video processing off, maybe that won't allow it through, or maybe having it on won't allow it through. Try turning whatever your video processing is right now, try turning it to the other thing, and see if that, well, because I mean, sometimes it's a thing like that.
I'm not disagreeing with you. Yeah. I'm laughing because it's stupid, but yet also probably true.
Yeah.
So this has definitely been something that I've seen as an answer to a question before. Like, how come this doesn't work? Well, video processing.
Yeah.
In which way?
Well, I mean, very often, like, people are like, my receiver used to show the volume on screen when I changed it. Now that's gone away. It's like, yeah, not only is that video processing, it's also input by input specific on a lot of receivers. So it could be a thing like that. It's worth double checking.
Let's get to our questions. We have Brad to start with. Brad continues to complete his converted garage space. He was trying to figure out whether to put up drywall over the old garage door, which is now lag bolted into place, or just fill the rest of the bays with the new studs and bare insulation and cover the whole thing with fabric. That way he wouldn't need additional acoustic panels on his front wall. I like the second part. On Rob's advice, he brought some speakers into the room and blasted some music to find out how much sound was leaking outside, directly outside the garage door. It wasn't too bad. But it was an expensive garage door, now completely lag bolted into place, and has almost a tongue and groove design, so that no air escapes between the garage door panels. And it has a gasket seal all around the edges, so air is not leaking through the garage door. But the base was definitely still thumping outside. Would drywall over the new studs help with that? I mean, is it not thumping when you go to any other walls? I mean, is it definitely that is the leaking point? Because, you know, bass can kind of go through all kinds of stuff.
It sure can.
And you didn't say you put subwoofers in there, right?
No, he did. He brought
subwoofers. I see
them.
Yeah, he bought the whole thing. I see it now.
But they're all kind of in one place. Like everything is co-located, at least in the image that he sent.
Right.
So
right next to the garage door as well.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you could could put drywall in there and then, you know.
Honestly, I mean, I don't know
much.
For sure, but honestly, my first thought is that decoupling the subwoofers and speakers from the floor, because, I mean, they're not decoupled in the image that he showed. They're just sitting on what at the time was just plywood subfloor that he's put down. So I think it very well might be physical vibration that's going through there, and just decoupling the subwoofers and speakers from the surface below them. That might be enough to I mean, it won't make it silent, but a good amount of that transmission of the deep bass might be mitigated by decoupling. So that's and honestly, you could test that before you decide to put up drywall or not. If you don't have any, dedicated decoupling devices on hand, fold up a comforter, fold up a blanket, and put your subwoofer on top of that. And if that reduces
subwoofers.
If that reduces it, then you will know that decoupling is the solution, and probably cheaper than drywalling the whole thing.
Yeah, drywalling one wall, I don't know is going to make a huge difference unless there is a clear, like the other option is air.
A hole through it.
Yeah. I don't know that's going to make a massive difference. I was like, well, maybe you could green glue it and everything else, but then if there's any other flanking path to get through this thing, which there's going to be,
that's right up next.
Yeah. So he says, strangely, just outside the window on the right, there was basically no bass at all, but the mid-range and treble were easily heard, clearly enough that it was almost like that window was open. There's a space between his house and the neighbors, but how concerned should he be about the bass that's thumping outside his garage door? And then the very clear sound just outside the window. He'll be asking his neighbors the next time he sees them. They can do a test, but if it does bother them, what's to be done? Well, I don't think that you should talk to your neighbors yet. I'll be honest with you. I don't think now is the time to start introducing them to the idea that they might be disturbed by sound. I think you should wait until you've done everything you can to make it as good as it can be, and then talk to your neighbors. So, if the window really is, well, first of all, I mean, I don't know why there was no base there, other than maybe you're sitting in some sort of weird, I mean, even though it's outside the room, some sort of window
just happened to be where there was a cancellation.
I don't know. It seems very strange, but this is probably a flanking path issue, and it's probably there's some sort of gap somewhere close to that window, not necessarily the window, but maybe
that, like, this used to be the garage. He's
right.
done some conversion to turn it into more indoor living space, but this used to be the garage. So my guess is that window there is probably just single pane glass.
Oh, right. Oh, for sure.
Because garages aren't made with insulated double pane glass. Why would you, when normally it's considered part of the outside space and unfinished? Sure. So that's almost certainly just cheap single pane glass for what used to be the garage. Spending some money there to replace that window with, one that you would use for interior space, that's maybe not the worst idea. I mean, I'm talking for your own comfort, let alone helping to reduce sound transmission
insulation-wise, it's going to be way better as far as letting heat in and out and all of that. Yeah. I mean, alternatively, if you're like, oh, no, I'm definitely not doing that, you could get one of those mass-loaded vinyl things to put
fills
over
the
that
window well thing.
Yes, you could do that.
Yeah.
And and listen, honestly, don't even mention your neighbors what the hell you're doing over here. I'm gonna be honest with you. That's not. I don't feel like that's a curse word, and I can get away with that on this podcast. So I don't normally get very blue with my language like I do in real life, but I feel like that one was okay, because you don't. The last thing you need to do is start planting ideas in your neighbor's
so that they're
head
listening
about
for it.
Oh, exactly. And the thing is, like, I've got neighbors that are right now. I've talked about this a number of times, and they have no idea I have a home theater over here. Every once in a while, I ask them, "Hey, do you ever hear my TV?" And they're like, "We've never heard anything." And honestly, they have no business complaining anyways, because they throw 3-day long, well, they used to before COVID, throw 4-day long parties like 3 times a year, around Super Bowl and New Year's and stuff like that. The place will be hopping and music late into the night and everything else, and we never complain. So I would not introduce anything to them to get them thinking about this until you've done everything you can to, I mean, you don't have a carpet or a pad.
Well, he does now, but coming up. But
right, but in this during this test, you don't have any of that. You don't have any room treatments. You haven't decoupled. You haven't dealt with this window or any way, shape, or form. If there is a flanking path through like an outlet that's on both, that's somehow on both sides or something like that, you haven't dealt with that. So I wouldn't deal with any of that yet. So, all right, question. We're now technically on question 2, even though that question had like 17 parts. There were also some rattles and booms in random places throughout the rest of his house. It's a double stud wall and fully insulated between the house and the converted garage, so that was a bit surprising. But he's living on his own, so if the neighbors don't complain, is there even a reason to worry about it? He says basically sound is weird, but he just wants to finally start enjoying the home theater equipment he bought quite some time ago. Whatever's going to get him to that point the quickest, what are our thoughts? If you are the only one in the house, who cares what's happening in the rest of the house?
Even beyond that, I also think the decoupling thing again here, because it was like rattles and booms specifically. So that means the double stud wall was doing the job that it's supposed to do, which is you could probably have voices going loud in the garage and not hear the voices inside the rest of the house. That's what the double stud wall is supposed to do. Rattles and booms, that's structural transmission of bass. Right. And again, I'm really thinking the decoupling is the solution there.
It's funny, people give so little thought to decoupling when it comes to subwoofers, and even their speakers, but definitely subwoofers. They're like, oh, should I put, which of the feet should I use, spikes or the hard plastic ones? I'm like, neither. You should leave either of those feet. You need to decouple that thing, and they're like, oh, that's not really going to do anything. I'm like, all right, then why do you even ask?
Why don't you take your phone, put it on vibrate, put it directly onto the hard table, and then put a pillow under it and see if it makes any difference?
Any difference whatsoever in how loud it is. All right, one last update from the past week. He's now put down carpet and painted the ceiling black. He'll be keeping the walls white, but with an OLED for the display, that shouldn't have a negative effect on black levels and contrast in the way it would with the projection setup. Correct?
Correct.
The blacks will still be black because they will be off.
That's right.
So, yes. He also went ahead and took down the non-load-bearing partition wall, so now the space is very long and narrow, roughly 10 feet by 30 feet. He likes it a lot better with the wall down, as it no longer feels small and cramped in there, but he'll have to make it work acoustically speaking, so any thoughts?
You need bigger subwoofers now.
yeah, it was like, oh. Yeah, I hate to say it, but yes, you now need more subwoofers, and you need to put them in the midpoints of your sidewalls, which are 20, it's
like
30,
behind where your seats
feet.
will be.
Yeah, both of them should be behind you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it can certainly be done because, I mean, even with, 10 by 30, 8-foot ceilings, so you're still under 3,000 cubic feet. So we're not going to ridiculous subs. He was going to get you subs anyway.
Yeah. It's not going to be like a SB 2000s would probably be okay. But PDs, yeah. I'd just get. I mean, you know me. I'm going to say
get the cylinders,
so.
sure.
Yeah.
But also like the open to the room, right, will be at the back, and that's not the worst thing. You'll have the majority of the open space is behind you, and that's really okay. I mean, we always talk about how you don't want your seat right up against the back wall, and if it does need to be close to the back wall, you want to heavily treat that back wall. Well, now you essentially don't have a back wall anymore. So in that regard, you're okay there. Basically, all you need are some, higher output subwoofers and the speakers. I mean, that's still mostly how close you're sitting to them. So even there, we're not super worried. So that's about it.
Yeah, and I would be, again, with that, even though there's a lot of space behind you, since it's so narrow, I would still be shooting for a 5-point something. I wouldn't be putting surround back speakers 20 feet behind you, that's for sure. Don't think I'd be doing that, no. All right, let me scroll down. Oh, that was it. That's the end of that question. That's the end of that question. This room is freaking me out. I cannot quite figure out what I'm looking at here, but whatever. All right. Billy and Dwain.
I combined because some of the questions are very similar.
Billy has ordered a new JVC NZ8 laser projector. Oh, before the price hike.
Yeah.
It isn't in stock yet, but he'd like to get prepared.
He didn't know at the time, but good move.
Good move, buddy. You just saved $1,000.
That's right.
We'll take a cut. Is there a particular ceiling mount we'd recommend for it? I'm going to be honest here. It's very hard for me to budget to suggest a budget mount for a projector that's this nice. So I'm going to probably point you towards Chief or what's the other one that we
Peerless, because that's the one I'm linking to is Peerless.
And I'd go that direction for a couple of reasons. One, it's easy. It's just they are built to be so much easier to level and to set up your projector. Number one. Number two, they are also much better about not moving after you have done it.
Yeah.
And that you'd be surprised how often things do actually move.
Drift a little bit. Physically drift, we're talking about.
Yeah, my projector's on a platform, on a big shelf that I built. It just sits there on its own little feet. I get it perfectly leveled up, and it's all manual. I don't have any motorized because it's an old projector. But still, the picture will drift every once in a while.
Sure.
So that's why I would push you towards something nicer. So what do you got, Rob?
Yeah, I'm going to send you to B&H Photo, who sells the Peerless PRG. It has the little worm gears, and there is specifically one for the JVCs that comes with a mounting bracket template thing to connect to the JVCs, because the JVC mounting points are wider apart than a lot of the universal spider mounts will reach. So they have a specific plate for JVC projectors. The chassis for the JVCs have really not changed. So you can double check just to make sure it absolutely works with the new ones, but there's no reason it shouldn't work with an NZ8. $120 I don't think is all that crazy expensive. I mean, I know there are, projector mounts for under $50, but compared to a $15,000 projector, I don't feel like $120 is overspending whatsoever. So yeah, the Peerless PRG with the specific JVC plate. And just do double check that's going to be right, but that's where I'd point you. Tom is frowning at something.
I am frowning because I'm looking. This next question made me think of something, so I'm trying to read this email real quick to find out how much stupid thing costs, and I can't find a price on it. All right. Yes. Which HDMI cable? The projector is in a nook at the back of his theater, right up next to the closet where the equipment goes, so it doesn't need to be super long. And what made me think of this is, I know I got an email recently from somebody that and it ended up being JVC that they just released some new HDMI.
Yeah, they're 50-foot long, $1,200 ultra high speed cable.
It just says 15 meters, so I was trying to do the math in my head.
49.3 feet or whatever. I call it 50 feet.
How much does it cost?
$1,200. $1,200. I don't know how they're planning to justify that, because you can go over to Monoprice.
Is it really $1,200?
It's $1,200.
I'm about to search.
Yeah, no, we'll link to that.
There it is. $1,200.
Well, no, so don't get that.
Write that up.
A, you don't need 50 feet, and B, you don't need $1,200. Monoprice, in your case, I'm pretty sure that 15 feet might be long enough, because Monoprice has
on your bends and stuff like that.
Yeah, Monoprice has for $24, so significantly cheaper.
Spend $1,200. Just think of how much better that cable is.
The $1,000 you saved,
and the ones that go through there.
The $1,000 you saved by ordering.
Are get there so much better. That would be better zeros and better ones.
Monoprice's certified ultra high speed HDMI cable. This is just their basic passive made out of copper one. $24 for 15 feet. If that isn't long enough for some reason, if it's a real winding path from the closet beside the nook where your projector is for some weird reason, they do have fiber optic. At relatively reasonable prices now, because the ones that are between 24 feet and 65 feet go for between $74 and $90. Now, that's more than the copper ones, but it's still pretty reasonable. And I mean, 24 feet should be long enough to go from that closet to that nook, no matter what kind of winding path it takes. So $75, call it, for the fiber optic. And those ones are certified. They are fully certified with the QR code and the hologram and everything. The even longer fiber optic ones that Monoprice sells don't have certification. It's only the ones from 24 to 65 feet that are certified. But that should definitely be long enough. And hey, they go up to 65 feet for $90. That's quite a savings over $1,200 for 50 feet. So
just think of how much of that $1,100 you saved you could give to your favorite podcasters.
That's right.
Or you could subscribe at patreon.com/AVRant podcast for like
$100 a month.
Your entire life.
You could do $100 a month for the next year.
$10 a month for the next 10 years. And still not pay us back totally. Billy and Dwain both want to know, which battery backup do we recommend? Again, for Billy's setup, the projector is in a nook at the back next to the gear closet. The nook has its own electrical outlet, so he's been using that. That stuff we said about using a male inlet sort of went over his head. So since the rest of his gear is close by, does he need all that? Or can he just get a battery backup and plug everything in as normal? He's got Best Buy gift cards he'd like to use, so bonus points if you can get the battery backup from there. And for Dwain, he wanted to know if power conditioners are a good idea, and if so, what's a budget-friendly option? All right, so let's just kind of bigger picture of this to begin with. So you want a battery backup on your projector, full stop, because you need to allow that projector to cool down if the power goes out, okay? Which is why I need a new battery backup, because every time the power goes out, my battery backup freaks out and goes into protection mode and doesn't actually send power.
Oh, your battery's probably dead. You probably don't need a whole new thing. You probably just need a replacement battery.
I'm not replacing the batteries in that kind of mix. It's not happening. That's not a thing.
They're only spec'd to last 3 years, so if you get longer than that, you did well.
It's fine. Anywho, so you need to allow your projector to shut down. I
also
cool down as it's supposed
definitely prefer to have a battery backup on anything with a hard drive. Right. Because if it's in the middle of doing anything, moving some data around or saving your game, or it's your DVR that's running or any stuff like that, then you got the battery backup on there and the hard drive can keep on spinning until you can properly shut it down.
So when we talked about the male inlet and all this other stuff that was a little bit confusing to you, totally understand. All right. Totally understand that. So if you look at the back of your projector or your computer or your anything, right, that is an inlet that you need near your battery backup, basically. Because what you want to do is you want to plug your projector into the wall. And then the wall that you're plugging into is not connected to your your main power. It's just connected to a Romex cable, which is put inside an electrical box. This is not hard. Anybody can do this. And sent back to another electrical box that's right next to your battery backup. And then that on that wall, it would look like exactly the same plug that you would have on the back of your projector, the same plug that you would have in the back of your computer or your AV receiver. And you would take another cable, which looks just like the cable that comes out of your projector into the wall, and plug it, the part that would normally go into your projector into the wall, and then the other part, which has the prongs on it, would go into your battery backup.
To try and make it even simpler, we're literally just talking about an extension cord.
That's all it is.
Normal extension cords that you buy are not supposed to go inside your wall. So we're just talking about making an extension cord that can go inside your wall.
That's exactly right.
Because it's the same materials, the same Romex that would normally go from any electrical outlet in your house back to your electrical panel. Is just instead of going back to the electrical panel, we're putting it to another outlet, but it's an outlet with the male side of the plugs so that you can plug a regular power cord into that, and now you've created an extension cord that goes through your wall, but legally so. That's all we were talking about there. But in your case, with the Nook right next to the right next to the closet, I'm assuming there's some kind of gap so that the cables can get from the closet to the projector, right? So there shouldn't really be a need for anything other than just a regular power cord going through there, because we're not... is that okay to go through a pass-through? If there's like a little partition wall between the closet and the Nook, are you allowed to put a power cord through that hole?
I don't think so. I mean,
obviously, physically it'll work, but I think there might be a code thing against that.
I think there might be a code thing. Well, if he's got a power plug in his Nook...
Yes, but that goes back to the electrical panel.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I mean, he would have to buy a battery backup for that, and then another one for anything else.
Yeah, you could put a battery backup in the Nook.
That's what I would do.
Plug it straight in there. Yeah, so in either case, the answer is APC. APC's battery backups. And these days, I'm going to point you specifically to the ones that they have under their, what is it called? Gaming performance. Right. Yeah, gaming performance series. Now, you're going to want to carefully look at the model numbers here because some of them are pretty close and the form factor looks exactly the same. But the ones that we want to look at, they start with a BR. There'll be a BR1000 or a BR1350 or a BR1500. Those numbers just refer to the number of watts that they can output from the battery, and they end in an MS. So it'll be like BR1350 MS. That's actually the one that I recommend most highly. It's the middle one. It's all the power you need. 6 of its 10 outlets are battery backup. The other 4 outlets are surge only, and it's got all the features you need at a very reasonable price. Now, who were we talking to first? Billy. Billy mentioned that if possible, he'd like to buy at Best Buy because he's got some gift cards. So they don't seem to carry, when I looked online, the BR1000 or 1350 or 1500 MS, but they do have the BGM 1500, which has a little bit nicer form factor. It's exactly the same features, but the form factor looks a little bit nicer. It looks like it's meant to, go beside an Xbox Series X. That's exactly what it looks like, and that is available at Best Buy for $260, and that is equivalent to the BR1500 MS. The 1500 watts is what that thing can output from its battery, so you'll be in good shape with any of those as your options. And as far as power conditioning goes, I don't buy into any of the fancy talk about making your picture look better or your sound cleaner, and none of that stuff. What you want is surge protection, you want battery backup. That's about it. That's what you want. You want proper surge protection and battery backup.
So, I mean, on the APC I have and the Panamex I have, they both have readouts as far as what voltage they're getting in and all of this other stuff. And every once in a while, I'll hear them click or whatever as they are boosting the voltage because the voltage has dipped a little bit. And,
And you get all that on these as well. They got a front panel display. It shows you
you
what's going in, what's going out, how much of your battery is left.
It's so funny because this idea that your power could be dirty, and it's, I mean, this comes from a real place. It's not like it's impossible for these things to happen, but it's one of those things where you're trying to protect yourself from something that you don't need to protect yourself from unless you notice it being a problem. And all of us are like, well, I never noticed it. Should I get one? No. I mean, you just answered your own question. You didn't notice it, so it's not a problem because it would be noticeable. The thing is, though, is if you buy a battery backup, you're getting all the rest of it anyway.
Yeah.
So it doesn't make any difference if you want it or not.
You're getting
it's
all
not
the
like
filtering
you can buy
and
one thing. Yeah.
all of that. Yeah.
Dwayne also wanted to know if active cooling is necessary. His gear gets warm to the touch, but not hot. So would additional cooling fans help anything in his case? No.
Doesn't sound like it.
We have articles over at AV Gadgets about active cooling that Andrew wrote up. And the reality is you would kind of know if you're having a cooling issue, mostly because your gear would start shutting off.
Yep.
There are some gear that gets insanely hot.
Yes.
Like you would be concerned. You would touch it and go, oh, this can't be right.
Yeah.
But the solution is almost always look in the manual and see if it has a spec there for it and see whether or not you're within that spec. And second, call the manufacturer and say, it's getting this hot. I have given it the adequate ventilation that you told me to give it. Is there something wrong?
And usually when it's getting that hot, it's because you don't actually have as much ventilation as they said to give it.
Right.
I mean, you stick an Xbox Series X into a little cubby hole, and that thing's going to get hot, and you're going to need something to expel the hot air and maybe bring in some cool air. So in your case, if you're saying things get a little warm, but definitely not hot, I don't think you need anything additional. You don't need the additional sound that those fans will generate. And
even the quiet ones, they are quiet, but they're not silent.
Yeah, they're not silent, and the fans will be drawing power of their own, so you don't need all that.
Yeah, just more things to plug into other things. Though I will say, having a cooling fan that plugs like right into your receiver, like that little stupid outlet in the back that nobody does anything with, kind of a neat little solution. But the only time I've ever really needed active cooling is in an equipment rack.
Yeah.
Where all the gear is way too close together.
And it's all in a closet or something.
It's basically like in a cabinet or a glass cabinet. And I put it, and this is on me, and I fixed it immediately, but I put it at Xbox 360 in the big gap at the bottom.
Right.
Which basically just cooked everything above it.
The hottest thing at the bottom is not the best idea.
It cooked everything above it and sent the receiver into protection mode. So I took the Xbox 360 out, put it literally on top of the cabinet, like outside the cabinet, on top of the cabinet, and didn't have a problem.
Yep.
After that, but yes, if you are giving your receiver active enough ventilation, you shouldn't have any problems whatsoever. Jeff, 2 weeks ago, Jeff told us how he's moving to a condo that has a small guest house, and he tends to use the guest house as his home theater. Don't remember. Welcome to Jeff. First time caller, long time listener. We sounded pretty adamant they should not remove the small washroom that's in the guest house to make the home theater area bigger. But he really wants to.
It seems
and
like.
Here's his reasons. Let me tell you about going to the bathroom, son. I don't like to have to leave the house to do it. I mean, when am I camping? All right. But he sent us a diagram that shows how close the guest house is to the main condo. It's basically just the width of a sidewalk in between. So it's no real hardship to go outside the glass door of the guest house and then to the sliding glass door of the main condo if someone needs to use the washroom. So he's showing it to us. It's I don't know where it is.
Guest house on the left, main condo on the right. That's what we're looking at.
I'm going to tell you, my friend, you're just killing the resale value of your little condo unit thingy here by taking that.
He's like, I'm retiring in this place. I don't really care about resale value. That's
right. I don't care what happens to my family. Yeah, just think of when as you're getting older and you're going to need your canes or whatever. You're not going to want to use those going out into the elements to go pee. I'm telling you what would happen if you had my friends at your house. They would get out, they'd walk out that door and look to the right and left and go, I don't see anybody, and pee right there because they're animals. My stupid friends are animals. So given the close proximity, he figures he could remove the guest house washroom without missing it at all. That could leave him with roughly a 10.5 by wide by 17-foot long room for his theater, and he thinks it would be a lot more comfortable, maybe even allow him to keep his projector set up. So what do we think? Is he overlooking something? I mean, dude, you do you. You do whatever you want to do. Yeah. This is your house. I think it's a terrible idea, and I'm going to stick by that. I really feel like you should keep the bathroom. I really honestly feel that way.
I would never take out a bathroom that wasn't itself an afterthought addition or something like
Right.
that. I'm also, I don't know what the situation is with the pipes. I mean,
Right.
I'm assuming this is like a powder room, more like, I don't think it actually has a shower or a bath in there. So I'm thinking it's a toilet and sink, but like that drain has to be really properly handled, the toilet drain, because you do not want any back gases coming up from the sewer system. That is for darn sure. I mean, that can lead to an explosion. Methane gases coming back.
Well, I assume
into
that
the
if
guest
you're going to
house.
do this, you're going to have somebody professional come in and do it and cap everything.
Yeah,
the
but
way
it's
supposed to be capped.
not trivial. Like, undoing a bathroom is not
Right.
trivial. It can be more than you would anticipate, and then you might still have like weird little pipe nubs that are left over and stuff. So
Okay, so in my garage, there was clearly at one point a sink or like maybe a bathroom or an outdoor like mop sink out there.
Sure.
Right. So I have coming out on my wall two taps, so hot
Yeah.
and cold taps that are just closed off,
Yeah.
but left there with no hoses coming out of them, but like the silver pipes with the little oblong screwy thingies on top to lock them down, and then the drain pipe that goes back into the main
Yep.
whatever. It's just there.
Yeah.
It's open.
Yeah.
It's there.
Yeah.
And the other day, this has literally happened to us yesterday or the day before. I walked into the garage for apparently the first time ever while someone was running water in the sink, and I could not figure out what that noise was. And it was this pipe just letting the noise of the water going down
Sure.
my main trunk line there. That noise was echoing through that little pipe, and it was making this weird hissing noise, and I couldn't figure out what it was. And we turned the water off, and once all the water ran through, that noise was gone, and I was like, oh, it's just the water. But can you imagine that being the case in your home theater, that there's this, because then you would go, oh, I'll just stick a rag in there or something. But then you've got a pipe sticking out of a wall with a rag in it, and maybe it blocks the gases, and God knows what. This is a bad idea. But,
I would never do this.
If you are going to do it, you need to hire. You need to
Yes.
to get a fully fledged contractor in there to give you the lowdown on what it's going to take.
And do
to
not cheap
dismantle this
out.
bathroom.
Do not cheap out. If this is going to be done, do it 200% properly. Hire 3 separate contractors and make sure they all tell you and do exactly the same thing. Like that. Do not take any chances on this if you are insistent upon doing it. But I would never do it, and I think that a 10.5 by 12 foot area for your 2-person theater with a nice big flat panel is still going to perform excellently, and I would never remove that bathroom. But there, I've said my piece.
If I could get a nice big flat panel instead of this projector I have in here, I would do it in a minute.
97-inch OLED, Tom. 97-inch OLED.
No. Listen, I have a lot of hobbies. They all cost money. And my wife has I've been getting the hardcore stink eye lately. So there's no spending money on a 97-inch OLED right now. Jason says our advice for his basement home theater plans were super helpful. Yeah, talk to our friend Jeff up here, who seems to think we're idiots that don't know anything about bathrooms. But he's got some new info.
This is Jason.
So close. Jason's got some new info and some clarification, so he'd like to go over a few things. Well, whatever we said before is still true. That's what I gotta say. So anyways, I don't know what's going on. Those
Reminder
panels,
photos.
All right, so he's got a Nook, and his TV is in a Nook. And then he was talking about, and he's got and the Nook's pretty wide, but he's got his subwoofer in there. He's got left and right speakers kind of on stands outside of the Nook, and then he's got a projector kind of in the middle of the room just on a stand. And
all of this is temporary. All of this was just setting things up to get a look, get an idea, figure out his viewing angles. So,
and he's got a drop screen that he's put in front of the Nook, sort
Which
of.
was temporary, very inexpensive, just so he could try it out.
And then, but the problem is above the Nook on the left, there's sort of a angled corner that has a pipe in there or whatever you call it.
There's a duct in there, so he can't center the screen right now.
Right.
In the room.
So he says those panels on the left and right of the Nook at the front of the room, those are covers for windows. Oh. I thought those were medicine cabinets or
I know.
something.
I thought maybe they went to an electrical panel. But nope, they're covers for windows.
They're inside the nook on the left and right walls. In case you can't see this, they get very little light and are never ever open. And he was going to just black them out anyway, so they really do not need to be accessible. Oh, and there's a picture of it, and there's a window behind it.
That's right.
He liked our idea about having a false wall to cover the nook and then having a screen mounted to that so its top edge is just below the soffit so you can avoid the little angle that juts it in on the left that I just talked about. Using the nook as a big bass trap and having all of his gear behind the screen within the nook sounds like a good idea to him too. Well, it's because we're brilliant. But he isn't really familiar with what exactly a false wall actually is and how would he access his gear that would be behind the screen. Can we clarify that for him? I'll be honest with you. The whole false wall thing is very easy to understand, and then the hard part is realizing that you need to build a door into the stupid thing. So that's the hard part. But essentially, if you think of what a wall is, right? A wall has a rectangle. That is the framing of the wall, and inside that framing, there is 2x4s or whatever
studs of some kind going up and down.
They are usually 16 inches on center or 18 inches or 24 inches, depending on your building codes and if it's a ceiling or a wall or whatever. And it goes all the way across until you get to the other side, and you nail all that together, and then you put a roof on it, and you put it on top of a floor, and Bob's your uncle, you got a wall.
You put drywall on top of those studs, and that finishes off the wall.
Sandwich that on either side. So a false wall is just that, but instead of having 2x4s and structural framing, you have 1x2s or something. You could do 2x4s.
It could still be 2x4s. You're still doing the framing. They could be farther apart, and the what makes it a false wall is that what we're going for is that it visually looks like there's a normal wall there, but there's no drywall.
Right.
So actually, I'm going to go back up to Brad's photos where he covered over his garage door, because that is a false wall. It is a false wall in that he built the studs in front of the garage door, and he asked, should he put drywall on there? If he doesn't put drywall on there, and instead there's just insulation within those studs, and then fabric, acoustically transparent fabric that goes over those studs, then that is a false wall. It looks like there's a wall, but it's not drywall. Sound can go right through the fabric that's on there. So that's all. I mean, this terminology, false wall, that throws people. What we're really talking about is there's some studs with some insulation in them and some fabric to cover them instead of drywall. That's
instead of drywall, right? And the wall itself is not in any way structural. So
it's not structural at all. It doesn't hold anything.
Yeah, because you're building it within an existing room. So you would put the framing up around, the wall and ceiling that currently exists, and then you would put the studs in between. So, and then you need to leave one gap that's big enough for you to walk through. It doesn't have to be hugely big enough, but has to be big enough for you to get through. And
now, in his case, like what I was picturing, because I think he's picturing a vertical equipment rack, but I was thinking you're going to have an acoustically transparent screen. Your center speaker is going to be up at normal ear height, and you're going to have all the room beneath your screen. That's where I was picturing, like, the equipment will still be within the nook because the screen will be flush to the front of the nook. So the depth of all your equipment goes back into the nook. But I was picturing it all being in like a TV stand that goes below the screen.
He's got a TV stand. Just leave that where it is and put the center channel, instead of the TV being there, put the center channel on top of it.
Yeah.
Right? With something to decouple it. And then just insulation wall to ceiling on either side of the thing.
Or if that TV stand isn't big enough to hold all your gear, or it's not wide enough or something. I mean, you can certainly get a wider TV stand, right? But the idea is your center speaker goes on top of it behind an acoustically transparent screen, and then you can access all the gear from just below the screen. It's like you have a giant TV stand for your screen, except it's not actually holding the screen up. So that's how I was picturing it. So I don't think you actually need to be able to actually get physically behind the screen yourself as a human body and get back there.
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to run your Odyssey or whatever, so you might need to plug in something in there at some point, or you just want to have access to it.
The Odyssey mic goes in the front of the AV receiver, and that could be below the screen and accessible.
Oh, you're saying not have the false wall go all the way to the floor?
Yeah, well, I mean, like, the below the screen would be your TV stand. That's what I'm picturing. So, because I mean, you could build it all in there. You could build the shelves as part of the false wall if you wanted to. Like, just frame it all out. There's shelves that are beneath where your acoustically transparent projection screen is going to be. And it all kind of looks built in. It almost looks like an entertainment center at that point.
So if you didn't want to do that, if you just wanted to frame in that entire thing, then all you would really need to do is the fabric that covers the false wall that's on the right or the left of the screen, or underneath the screen, maybe in your case.
Underneath the
you
screen.
would build a flap that was Velcroed in place so that you could just, basically open it from one side or the other so that you could get past. So right with the way that you have your screen right now, right, to the left of your screen, there is some space.
Yeah, but there would be less because he wants to be able to center it.
Because he wants to be underneath it, right? But what I'm saying is, there you could put a Velcro flap up that you could get past it. If that's not enough, if your screen is lower and to the left a little bit and you don't have enough room, you'd put one below it so that you could just get back there if you needed to, or whatever. That's always the challenge of a false wall, is making sure you have access to the back of it. Because, at some point you're going to want to upgrade something, and you're going to need to get back there. But, I'm
thinking, that if you really need to actually physically get back into the Nook, you take the screen down, because the screen can be hanging on your studs that you put up.
Right.
And I'm just picturing shelves that, the depth of the shelf goes back into the Nook. So everything looks flush, right? The front of the screen to the front of the shelves, that all looks flush. And the shelves are built right in, and all your gear sits underneath the screen. It's still accessible. And then it's an acoustically transparent screen that takes up the vast majority of that Nook opening. So we're talking about the fabric that you would actually see is like just on the left and right and maybe a little bit under the screen. And that's all the place that you actually need the black acoustically transparent fabric. And then back there is just insulation, and if you ever need to get back there, you just take the screen down.
Right. That's another way to do it. Yeah. So it's however, there's different solutions here. And those windows back there, your screen, unless because the acoustically transparent, they have the black backing on it still.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah.
So I don't know that you have to worry that much. If the very little light comes through, I don't know that I would. But it'd be easy enough just to throw a.
It'd be pretty easy to black that out. Yeah.
Black that out, anyways. All right, let me go down here. Okay.
You could do aluminum foil.
He's got a door at the top of the. Yeah, there you go. It's classy. There's actually a door at the top of the stairs, so the basement isn't wide open to the upstairs. But that said, he really likes the idea of installing a set of French doors to close off the theater. It'll make it a rectangle, and not having the stairwell and doors into the other parts of the basement all open to the theater would still be a good thing, right? Mm-hmm. It's not a bad thing. I don't know that's going to make a huge amount of difference, but I think it would look nicer.
Yep.
So now the somewhat big surprise. He went to remove one of the 12 by 12 ceiling tiles to see what's above his basement ceiling. It turns out those ceiling tiles are glued in place. That was it's like somebody had a guest room with a bathroom and decided to take the bathroom out and didn't tell anybody. Okay. So they're glued in place. And now he really isn't sure what's actually above the ceiling. Furthermore, given the age of the house and when he estimates the house was finished, it's entirely possible the ceiling tiles are asbestos. Oh, well, isn't that exciting for you? That's a whole new can of worms, but given that he wants to finish the whole room, he'd be keen to have those ceiling tiles removed, properly removed anyways. So he'll investigate that situation on his own, but if it turns out that it isn't even a drop ceiling, how much of an ordeal is it going to be to run wires for in-ceiling Atmos speakers and run an HDMI cable for the projector? Well, it really depends on what. Let me look at this. Can I see the ceiling in any of these pictures?
If you go to the very first picture, you can sort of see a good portion of the ceiling there, because it's a pretty wide shot.
First of all, the thing about asbestos that you really need to know is don't touch it. Okay?
It's fine as long as
you don't touch it.
Doesn't become powder, basically, right? It's when it becomes dust and powder that is dangerous. When it's solid, it's perfectly fine. So you don't touch it. But so you get an abatement company to come in and do that if it's taken down.
So when people talk about acoustic panels and whether or not they're safe, which is something that comes up almost constantly, the problem that people think is the issue is that they think that what's going to happen is that the fibers within the fiberglass are going to come out and they're going to breathe them in, and it's going to make them sick and give them cancer. Okay, but that is not what happens with fiberglass. That's not how fiberglass interacts with you. Yeah, they don't break down small enough, and so if it gets into your lungs, you either expel it or whatever.
Asbestos was used for insulation, so what happened with asbestos gets equated with insulation, all insulation, and then we moved to fiberglass and rock wool, which are insulation but a completely different material, but people were still equating insulation with cancer because asbestos can give you cancer. So it was
so the thing about asbestos is that it gets very, very small. You breathe it into your lungs, and then you can't get rid of it. That's right. And that's the problem. So as long as you don't breathe it, which means if it's up there, it's covered with paint or it's glued or whatever, you don't want to touch it because that will create that dust, and then that's the problem. That's why when they come in, they're going to seal the entire, if it is asbestos, they're going to seal the entire room off. They're going to put a ventilation system that's going to suck everything out, and they're going to go in there with hazmat suits on and gas masks. Well, not gas masks, but respirators and everything to make sure that they don't get any of that stuff in them or on them. So don't touch it. Make sure you get an expert in there first and warn them that it might be asbestos. So how hard is it going to be? I don't have any clue.
Well, so I mean, let's go on the assumption that he gets it removed properly.
Right.
Let's hope it isn't asbestos, but if it is, regardless, he gets the ceiling removed properly. I would be surprised if the whole thing is drywall and then asbestos tiles or any type of tiles glued on top of it. That would be a really weird system. So I'm thinking it probably is a grid system that's above there. I'm not sure why they glued the tiles in place. Maybe
is it even if it's really old? Is it actually glue, or is it just so old that they've kind of fused together, which can totally happen?
The previous owners weren't the original owners who finished the basement, and it was asbestos, so they decided to seal it instead of taking it down. That's another possibility, but I'm
could
guessing
be painted over. I mean, all these things.
Yeah, I'm guessing there is not drywall above that. At which point you can have a proper drop tile ceiling installed once this one is removed.
Right.
In fact, I might do that regardless. I might just have whatever ceiling is there, have it removed, and have a proper drop tile ceiling installed, because that will make all of your cable running so easy. And you can insulate above there, and then you can access it. And it's always a good idea to have a drop ceiling in a basement anyway. So that would be my solution. Have what's there removed. If there needs to be an update to a drop tile ceiling, do it at that point. That's what I would recommend.
Yeah. So the top of the fireplace mantle on the right is about 4.5 feet from the floor. Our suggestions put two pairs of surround speakers, one for each row of the seats. Seems reasonable given the slightly lowered ceiling height. Will there be enough separation, about 3 feet, from the fireplace mantle to the ceiling so that the surround speakers and the Atmos speakers won't be redundant? It's really more about angles than feet in this situation because of how low they would be.
Because your Atmos speakers don't have to be right up against the side walls.
No, they don't.
So we're talking about the hypotenuse.
Right. Even though your front speakers, they're supposed to be in line with your front speakers, and your front speakers are going to be very wide because of the width of your screen that you're looking at. You can cheat those Atmos speakers in, and I would even cheat them as far in as
the outside edges of your couches.
Yeah. I was going to say the arms of your couches would be about, as far in as I would cheat them. But that gives you plenty of room.
You can definitely still have clear separation of sound of these speakers are on my side walls, just on my fireplace mantle, versus in-ceiling speakers. You will definitely be able to tell those speakers apart. So I'm not worried about them sounding redundant at all.
If you're watching their YouTube video, I don't know what the heck's going on. I feel like I got ants in here or something. I got something's itching me and it's driving me. I think I'm talking about asbestos. It's driving me crazy. All right. Lastly, he had an AV installer come over and get their ideas and to get an estimate. They offer room design, 3D rendering, and equipment sales. And then they have contractors they work with to handle any remodeling. Some of what they said lined up with our advice, but some things gave him pause. And he'd just like to know whether we think he should proceed with them or not. I mean, it depends on how much of this work you can. Obviously, you can't take the ceiling down, I don't think, but it depends on how comfortable you are with the rest of it. They suggested adding a door at the back, just like we did. They also suggested a false wall to cover the nook, just like us. While they could offer designs with full soundproofing, after talking with him, they agreed that not too much needs to be done. And overall, Jason was happy with their ideas about the room itself. They are SVS dealers, so they had suggestions for the subwoofers that lined up with ours, but they are not Seymour AV dealers, and they seem to be rather strongly against using an acoustically transparent screen. They said it would compromise the video quality too much. Okay. Really.
Weird and surprising.
Yeah. But they didn't seem at all concerned that a solid screen might compromise the center speaker placement, which would be behind the screen.
No. I mean, if it were a solid screen, it would have to be below like it is now.
Furthermore, they seem to be fans of putting all the speakers in the ceiling, even saying they could put the surrounds and surround back ceilings in the speaker along with the Atmos speakers. They can absolutely do that. It's
physically
idea.
this isn't.
You'd be surprised how many speakers you could put up there if you really tried. It could be wall-to-wall speakers up there. They just need enough
Every drop
drywall.
ceiling tile has 4 speakers in it.
That's right.
It's physically possible, and this isn't shocking from an AV installer at all. From a home theater installer, it's not shocking that they want to put all the speakers in the ceiling because so many clients want all the speakers in the ceiling.
Right. And lastly, they want to run Cat6 to the projector instead of active or optical HDMI cable. He isn't sure yet if they're willing to install products they do not sell themselves, so we'll have to ask about that as well as their willingness to do what they request rather than what they suggested. So what do we think? So do we think it's worth hiring them? So what they're going to do, AV installers have to deal with, unfortunately, AV clients. And their AV clients are people who are not willing to do any research or understand any of this stuff because why would they? They're paying you to do it. And that's an important thing to understand is that those people do not understand AV at all. So when they ask for things, the things they ask for are sonically ridiculous and visually unreasonable. So they want all the speakers that they're supposed to get, the 7.2.6 or 7.4. Actually, usually they want 7.0. Whatever, because they don't want any subwoofers.
Right. They don't want to see any of them.
They don't want to see anything.
Yeah.
They don't want to see any of it. They want it all to be in the ceiling.
There can't be a wire in sight. There can't be a unsightly speaker standing on its own anywhere. That's almost always what they're going after. I mean, here's what I would kind of come at this. I don't think that what they said there is anything that would shock me from a home theater installer.
Well, the center channel behind a non-acoustically transparent
Well, I don't think
screen
they've meant behind
pause.
it. I'm a little surprised that any AV installer would shy away from acoustically transparent because usually that's the easiest way to hide the speakers. Is if you're going to have a projection set up, they're gung-ho for it. But if they want to put everything in the ceiling, because that's what they normally do and sell, they probably sell Speakercraft, and the profit margin on that is so high.
Speakercraft is insanely high. the points they get on that are nuts.
Well, crappy speakers at incredibly high prices. So none of this is super shocking. My sort of feeling on it is their ideas for the room sound reasonable. They can build you the false wall. If they don't sell and won't sell Seymour AV and they don't want to deal with an acoustically transparent screen, you take care of the equipment. That's my feeling on this, right? You've already got the speakers. You already know how to set them up. So have them do all the, work on the construction, design the room. They can have the false wall. Then you get the Seymour AV screen. It's very easy to hang that on the studs. You set up the speakers, and then you're not worried about that. You have them install 4 Atmos speakers. They can definitely handle your 4 overhead speakers. And that's how I would come at this. Rather than have them literally do all of it, you set up the equipment if they don't, agree with that side of things. As far as the HDMI cable, not shocking they'd want to do HD base T because all the installers do HD base T. If they can't run conduit or they can't hire a contractor who can run conduit, then walk away. Or, because that's ridiculous. Any contractor can put conduit in there. And then you know what? It doesn't even matter. Just say, don't even you pull the HDMI cable through the conduit if they don't want to do it.
Leave me a string. That's all I want is a string.
Yeah. So that's what I would do.
Yeah. The only thing that really, most of that is fine. And they're going to hire, workers or contractors or whatever to do the false wall, to do whatever drywall work needs to be done and all of that. But and that might be worth it to you just on that front.
Oh yeah, because he said he doesn't want to do that kind of DIY stuff. He doesn't want to install the door himself. He doesn't want to do any framing or whatever himself, and that's perfectly fine. That's perfectly reasonable. That's what you pay contractors to do, and they can absolutely do those things.
Yeah. So the thing that's the that's hard if you try to, even if you try to manage that project yourself, is finding a contractor that is knowledgeable enough about this type of install to be able to do it. Like a contractor can do anything you ask them to do. But if you don't exactly know what to ask them to do, which is kind of the case here, then you may end up having them do something at the end, go, well, that doesn't work. And they're like, well, that's what you asked for, though.
Right.
And this gives you a buffer between them where you can get to the end of this project and say, yeah, but I can't get to my gear behind here because you guys didn't leave me any flap or, any way to take the screen down or anything else. And they'll say, well, we didn't think of that. And you're like, well, you shoulda, and now fix it, and it's on you. So it gives you a little bit of a buffer there. So there is some benefit there as well. Just make sure that they weren't super serious about putting a center behind a not acoustically transparent screen.
No, that was never part of it. It was
what they
solid
really
screen
meant was
center below the screen.
Below the screen, yeah. Jeremy in France, we made a difference. We're an international aid organization, Rob. Here we are, helping people across the globe.
Such help.
We are. Listening to us actually convinced his brother not to go with another soundbar or the Sony HT-A9 wireless speaker system. He'll go for regular speakers with a receiver and use the SVS PB1000 subwoofer that he already owns. He still absolutely cannot put speakers in or on the ceiling, so he's still wanting upward firing options for Atmos, but with the basic concept sorted, Jeremy would like to refine the plans. Okay. Upward firing Atmos speakers it is. That's fine. The room is roughly 11 by 11. There's a 65-inch Panasonic OLED in there with a couch about 6.5 feet away. Is that field of view correct? And is the room just plain too small? His brother's a bit concerned that he's going to be hamstrung in having his first proper home theater in such a small room. Well, it's too small if you want 15 people in there. If it's not too small for just your brother-in-law and maybe one other dude.
It's about the same size as my home theater, and I have a whole podcast where I talk about home theaters. So, I think the room is reasonable. I mean, it's not
small.
Yeah, it is small. It is 2-3 people. It's not going to be a huge smattering of people going in there, but you can absolutely do it. 6.5 feet away from a 65-inch OLED, so that's smaller than a 45-degree field of view, because that would be about 5.5 feet from a 65-inch or 6.5 feet from a 75-inch, but that's still a pretty reasonable field of view. That's right around a 40-degree field of view, so I don't think that's too small. I don't think any of this is too small as long as the plan wasn't to have, more than about 3 people in this theater.
Right, yeah. If you're not going to have I want 2 rows of seats and, a bar at the back. Well,
and also, realistically, what's the alternative? Does he have a much larger room that could be turned into a dedicated theater? In which case, I don't think this would even be a question. So.
Right. You're like,
So if this is...
too often we get that question. We're like... I own these speakers. Are they bad? I'm like, well, I hope not, because you already own them. I mean, I don't know what to tell you at this point. What are you going to do, sell them?
It's like if
I just bought this TV. Is it good? I've got some bad news and some good news.
If this is the room you have in which to set up a theater, can it be a nice theater in here? It sure can. Just, for about 2 or 3 people.
So his brother tried to convince his wife that tower speakers would be okay. She said no. 11 by 11, I agree with his wife. And Jeremy's pretty sure we would say no to towers in this room too. I already did. Can we convince him that smaller bookshelf speakers are the right choice here? As a bonus, it would give his wife a win. Dude, do you want this to be a home theater, or do you want this to be the room in which your divorce started? So,
I mean, not only that, the performance will actually be better with bookshelf speakers in this room. So on all fronts, you should be getting smaller speakers in this room.
You're sitting 6.5 feet away at the greatest from any speaker in this room, pretty much. You could get NHT Super Zeros and call it a day. Everybody's happy except for you because you wanted tower speakers for unreasonable reasons because you looked online and you saw everybody with these massive tower speakers and thought that's what I want. You do not need them. You can get very small speakers that will perform just fine, get plenty loud enough, and your wife will be happy that the speakers are much smaller than... I think that this is a very good plan, by the way, and that is to try to convince her of the tower speakers, and then when she says no, give in and get like tiny bookshelf speakers that perform just fine in here and say, this I got for you, honey, because I love you so much. And she's just gonna...
SVS satellites in all positions would be absolutely fine.
It would just rock this place. rock them. I'm telling you, and they're not that big, and not small, but they're not that big, and that would absolutely crush this room because you don't really need anything else. Yes, once you cross them over to the subwoofer, you could. I actually think that tower speakers would sound worse in here than
they definitely would. I have no question they would sound worse.
No. So, your who is it? Brother-in-law? I don't remember. Brother-in-law's wife is right. We suggested going with one of Marant's slimline receivers because slick looks and a compact system were desired. Jeremy's brother is concerned that the slimlines won't have enough power. Get this guy off of Reddit, okay? Yeah. Tell him to stop reading the internets because they're wrong. Not enough power. I was thinking of getting a Denon 3700H instead because in the 11 by 11 foot room sitting 6.5 feet away, what you really need is more power. If he did, he'd need to hide it in a closet. For that, he would actually need a closet. And Jeremy is aware that the 3700H only has a single HDMI 2.1 input, right? Any reason to go with the bigger receiver? Well, the bigger receiver, the only reason to go with it is if he really wants upward firing Atmos modules, because I don't know if the slimlines do that. Do they do that?
Well, they do it, but they top out at 7 speakers max. Now, in this room size, we are definitely stopping at 5 floor-level speakers. There's no world in which we suggest having surround backs in this room size. So the only question is, are you okay with 2 upward-firing speakers? That's handling your Atmos duties. Or do you need 4 upward-firing speakers? Because the slimline receivers, they do stop at 7 speakers. So you could have 5.1.2 would be your setup. Continuing to use the SVS PB1000 that you already own, you would end up with 5.1.2. Now, if you desperately want 5.1.4, all being upward-firing, which... Yeah, I mean, I'm the one who's always saying when you have Atmos, I want you to have 4 speakers. But when they're all going to be up firing in a room this size, like I honestly, I don't think Atmos is very important in here. I don't think you need Atmos whatsoever. But if you just want to see Atmos light up on the front, which fine, I get that. You want to see Atmos light up on the front, then I would be totally fine stopping at 5.1.2 in here with 2 upward firing modules on my front speakers, and I would stick with the slimline. Yeah. I would stick with the slim line.
Well, there's just so many things that are gonna. By trying for 2 extra speakers, are you now going to have to get a receiver that's you have to move to a different room, and then you have to deal with how you're going to control it from that other space, and then all the other things that go. I don't think it's worth the hassle.
No, I mean, I would say, the slimline also just has the single HDMI 2.1 input. That's all that Denon and Marantz have at this moment. So if we're going to imagine a scenario where you desperately want more than one HDMI 2.1 input on the receiver, and you desperately want to get to 5.1.4, not 5.1.2, then I would point you to the Onkyo TX NR7100. It's actually about the same price as the X3700H, and that one goes to 9 speakers and has Dirac built in and has 3 HDMI 2.1 inputs. So that would be the alternative. I would point you to the NR7100 from Onkyo if you just have to. It's not small.
So he excluded Focal from his short list of speakers to addition because they don't have upward firing Atmos modules, even though Jeremy owns Focal speakers and his brother likes the way they sound. So that's a great reason to exclude speakers. But whatever. Did they overlook an upward firing option from Focal?
Yes, you did.
Oh, well, then there you go. I was going to say, not only, I mean, I don't know if you have or not, but, anything can be upward firing if you just angle it. I mean, if you try hard enough, it's not that hard. It's not like they have to be built in a specific way.
Right. So Focal does not have separate modules, so that you didn't overlook. But they do have actually a speaker I suggested, which is the SIB Evo. Which are satellite speakers. So, hey, we're checking off the compact, slick looks, will make the wife happy. And the SIB Evo, there are 2 versions. There are the regular satellite SIB Evos that are a 2-way speaker. And then there are the SIB Evo Atmos, which have the upward firing driver integrated into the top of the speaker. And I would happily go with those all day long in an 11 by 11 foot room sitting about 7 feet away. I think they are a fantastic choice if you already like the way Focal speakers sound. I think the SIB Evo's Dolby Atmos would be a great choice. And you can get wall mounts too, because I remember he wanted the surrounds to be wall mountable. You can get wall mounts for the SIB Evos. I think you should not overlook Focal. You're in France. They're a French company.
There you go. On his speaker short list are the KEF Q350s.
Too big.
And the Clip. What?
The 350s?
I thought I said something wrong. I'm
No.
I don't think so.
No.
And the Clips are the Clips RP600Ms.
Also too big.
Any thoughts on those? Well, I mean, clearly he's already said what he thought. Yeah, you are sitting so close. They just have to play pretty close to 80 hertz. Like, they only have to get all the way down there. Honestly,
those Q350s, those are big honking speakers, man.
This guy really wants large speakers,
and yet originally he didn't. I don't entirely know. Take a real good look at those.
He's a man of passions.
Take a good look at those Focal Vivos. I think they're the perfect solution here.
So it's either big speaker or tiny speaker,
right?
Or no speaker. It's got to be.
Well, it was sound bar or apparently towers from 6 feet away.
I want to take Klipsch over Focal, like, full stop, ever. Honestly, the KEFs I could at least consider, but the 350s, they make
get
the 150.
If you get the 150s. If you're going to do the KEFs, get the 150s. That'd be fun.
But you don't need any of that. So, given where his brother wants to position all of his gear, he was intending to plug his sources, Xbox, PlayStation, and Blu-ray player into his HZ200 OLED, which it's a Hisense. I don't know what that is.
No, it's Panasonic.
And then rely on eARC to send the audio to the receiver. That feels strange to Jeremy, but would it work? Would there be any issues? Well, you definitely don't need to do that with the Blu-ray player. And I don't even know. It's eARC, right? So it should be able to send all the stuff down that it's supposed to. Panasonic, I don't think, has a problem with DTS, which LG does. So it should work fine, except that you have to rely on eARC. And
yeah. I mean, all that really means is that you won't be able to look at any of the information on the receiver. You won't be able to see any of the info. Like, if
all
you plug
of this sounds more busy than it needs to be. Like, all the gear is going to be right next to the receiver.
Well, I mean, if you've got Xbox Series X and a PlayStation 5, and you've only got the single HDMI 2.1 input, then this is the solution, and it's fine. It'll work absolutely fine.
Can't you get the $200 Switch?
You could get the $200 Switch, or you could get the Onkyo. If you're already willing to look at that price point, you could get the Onkyo, and then you've got the 3 HDMI 2.1 ports on the receivers. So maybe that's the solution. Maybe that makes everyone happier. You can have 4 upward firing. You can have 5.1.4.
But now everything's in the closet, right? Everything's got to be in the closet.
Receiver's in the closet, yeah.
Well, everything else is going to be next to the receiver. Why wouldn't you put it next to the receiver?
Yeah. But that might be the solution here. I'd be perfectly fine.
I would never plug the Blu-ray player directly into the
unless
TV.
It's just a matter of cable routing. If it just makes more sense to do it that way, there's nothing wrong with using eARC. It's fine. You just won't be able to see info on the receiver. That's about the downside.
And anytime you enter the word the letters ARC together in an AV solution, you're asking yourself, how come things don't work the way they should work? And it's almost always that's also the answer for that question. So that would be my only concern. I know that eARC works just fine for a lot of people until an update rolls out for something, or they change a piece of gear, and then suddenly nothing works, and they can't figure out why. So that would be my only concern. But if he is rocking a PlayStation 5, I mean, he could have a PlayStation 4. We don't know.
Right.
But if he is needing all the 2.1 things, then yes, he has to plug it directly into the TV, or get a receiver that has more than one HDMI 2.1 input, or buy the little stupid switch from Denon for $200. Jay has Polk T series speakers, which isn't that the T virus from Umbrella Corporation?
No, but it's the entry level.
He saw some Polk RTI series speakers for sale and was curious, how old is that series of speakers, and would they be a good upgrade for his front 3 speakers? I mean, RTI, I remember being fairly decent. Am I remembering that right? I don't really remember.
I've never been a huge fan of that. They're not bad. I'm not like angry at having them or liking them or anything, but I'm not huge. RTI has been around a while. Like, originally those go back to, I think, 2007 or something like that. The most recent iteration of them is 2015, I'm pretty darn sure. The current RTI series, so if that's what it was. But here's the thing. If you're coming from Polk T series, obviously was happy enough.
These guys. I think I've actually owned one of these. My wife, when I got married,
a lot of us have. If you've ever shopped at Best Buy, you've seen Polk RTI speakers. So, I mean, he was happy enough with Polk that he's obviously continued to look at Polk. But I'm like, if you're looking to upgrade from your Polk T series speakers, I would look at a different brand than Polk. That's my take on it. I don't think this is a big enough worthwhile upgrade to go from the T series to the RTI series. I think if you want a nice upgrade to your front three speakers, we're going to send you to a different speaker brand. Very easy to start with SVS Prime or Aperion, because both of them are free two-way shipping. So bring in a pair or just bring in the center. If it doesn't float your boat, then you send it back and you aren't out a single penny. Bring them both in at the same time. A/B compare them. You're not risking any money there. And also store brands that you can find. KEF, you'd be definitely looking at KEF Q series. If you're willing to risk some shipping, then, Ascend, I'll always recommend Ascend's SE series as a really, really high value, but you are risking some shipping cost on there. They don't do the free shipping. But yeah, I mean, start with some like SVS Prime, some Aperion Novus, because you're not out of pocket a single cent. And yeah, I think you'll notice a much bigger difference doing that. I'm not keen on sending you to go get some Polk RTI speakers on sale to replace your T series.
Okay. I'm generally not keen on Polk, full stop, but that's just me. I mean,
some of them are pretty decent. If you like that ring radiator sound, if you like your treble to come out like a laser beam to your ears, then get yourself a ring radiator.
Infinite Gary, is there an AV receiver or pre-pro that will allow him to have an Atmos configuration using 4 upward firing modules plus a second configuration that would have an ideal Oro 3D speaker layout? What would that Oro 3D layout look like, and would the Atmos configuration and the Oro 3D configuration be sharing any of the speakers aside from the 7 floor level speakers, of course? So Atmos. Okay, Oro 3D, basically, for those of you that don't remember because nobody uses it because it's dead, there's 7...
You just ticked off all the Oro fans, all 3 of them. Tom.
And Rob's one of them, so there you go.
I'm not really an Oro 3D fan.
It doesn't take much to be counted among their ranks, Rob. You have to just not speak of them the way that I do.
Okay.
So 7 floor level speakers, then move about 3 feet up your wall, put 7 more speakers directly above those speakers.
Actually, only 5. They don't have surround back elevations.
They don't have surround backs? Okay.
Nope.
So 5 speakers, sorry.
Yep.
And then 1 voice of God speaker that's above your head.
Directly above you.
That is so if this sounds familiar to you, what you've got here, in essence, is aside from the center channel, which there is no center Atmos speaker.
No, there's no center Atmos. There is a center height in Oro 3D.
Right. Okay. So that's the only speaker that's well, that's not the only one, but that's essentially the speaker that is really unique to Oro 3D is that one.
And the voice of God.
Well, I haven't gotten there yet. Hold on. Yeah. So the front speakers could essentially, or the height speakers for Oro 3D are also front heights for Atmos.
They definitely can be. Yes.
They can. They're basically in the same location, or they're close enough that you could cheat them to make
front heights are the most compatible with every format out there.
Right. So the surround speakers, which should be directly to your side, and then the Oro 3D above ones could be called top middles, kind of ish. Not really,
They're
but
not
that's
really.
as close. That's as close as they
surround
get.
heights.
And then the voice of God speaker, I think it's the only one that does it. So that you could use your top middles from Atmos in order to make the voice of God one is the mono price.
It is, yeah. They matrix their own
processor.
Nobody.
Yeah.
Oh, Trinov can do it too, but
Trinov, yeah.
Yeah.
But, I mean, for a reasonable price.
Yeah,
really
but to do this, to talk about this, to have because he's not even talking about using front heights and rear heights. Rear heights are a compromise as far as Oro 3D is concerned.
That is true.
Oro 3D in their ideal setup does not have rear heights, but since front heights and rear heights are also compatible with Atmos and DTS-X, Oro 3D has acquiesced and accepted front heights and rear heights as a compromise that is compatible with all 3 immersive audio formats. But if we're talking ideal, what they want are front heights, surround heights, and then you could have the center height. Not everything does the center height in Oro 3D, but you could have the center height and the voice of God that's directly above you. That's their idealized setup. And then Gary is talking about actually having, in his email, he said upward firing.
Yeah, that doesn't go
Atmos
with
modules.
Atmos. That doesn't go with Aura 3D at all. None of that.
That doesn't go with Aura 3D at all. But but it's because he already has 4 modules, so he's like, can I keep using those and then also try Aura? Well, there is a way to do this. You could get Denon's X6700H, and what that has are the 2 completely separate speaker configurations where you can run Odyssey twice and have 2 completely separate setups. And what would be key here is that you have the option of putting the X6700H into pre-amp only mode, where it actually turns off all of its internal amplifiers and doesn't put any sound out of them at all and only uses the pre-outs. So if you were to do this, you would have to power your 7 floor level speakers externally. They would have to be connected to a 7-channel external amp to make this system work. And then what you could do is, let's just say for the Aura 3D setup, you actually use the built-in amplifiers of the X6700H because it has 3 sets of heights, right? It's got height 1, height 2, height 3, and those could be set up as front height, surround height, and then center height plus voice of God. That's one of the configurations you can have. So 6 overhead speakers, the ideal Aura 3D configuration, and those are powered by the X6700H. And then the 7 floor-level speakers are powered externally. That would be speaker configuration number 1. Speaker configuration number 2, you would actually put the X6700H into preamp only mode. So now none of the Aura 3D speakers are being powered anymore. The internal amplifiers have all been shut off in the X6700H. You would need another 4 channels of external amplification, and they would power your Atmos modules. And now the second speaker configuration in the X6700H would be an Atmos configuration with 4 upward firing modules. So this can be done. You can do this with an X6700H, but you'll need 11 channels of external amplification to make it work.
Or you could not do this and save all of that money.
Dude, it's Gary.
I don't care.
The money's not a problem.
I mean,
Do you think Gary is going to be mad at an excuse to buy a 7-channel external amplifier? Do you think he's going to be mad about that?
I really think that he should just set up one room as Aura 3D, another room as Atmos, another room. I mean, why try to multitask in these? He's got enough setups where...
But he can switch between the two pretty much at the press of a button if he does it with the X6700H.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Brandon, who had a perfectly normal name until a couple of months ago, and then now no one can cheer him on anymore.
Oh, dear Lord. Okay.
So
I didn't need to think about that. What a bummer.
I have a friend named Brandon at the gym. Whenever he's trying hard on a route, I have to say, I have to give him a nickname.
Oh, dear.
All right. Brandon says, theoretically, if 2 different speakers had the exact same frequency response graph, would that mean they sound exactly the same? If not, why not? And does the same answer apply to subwoofers? The exact same frequency response graph. Okay, so the frequency response graph essentially is a measurement, usually on axis, taking at 1 meter or with 1 volt or whatever, however they do it with whatever, and it just shows that one measurement. So that gives you a basic understanding of how that speaker performs in that orientation, and then theoretically anechoic condition, meaning that there's no reflections of the room around it, and the microphone is set dead center, usually
in line with the tweeter.
Typically. Maybe a little bit below. It depends on how they do their measurements. So does that tell you everything you need to know about a speaker? I don't know. If you heard a person, if you could see them from across the room and you could hear them say one sentence, would that tell you everything you needed to know about that person? Because that's essentially the same thing. So what this frequency response gives you is the capabilities of the speaker in this one orientation. It's useful information because we can compare it to other measurements that are taken in exactly the same way. So it tells us this speaker in this orientation has a frequency response that looks like X. So it dips, it has a dip here, it has a hump here, and it kind of gives us an indication of how it performs. But it doesn't tell us everything about the speaker. It doesn't tell us its off-axis response. It doesn't tell us, how it changes when it is cramp. It tells us how. Sorry if I bent my leg in the wrong way. How it's going to perform off-axis. It doesn't tell us, any sort of comb filtering that might be happening at different elevations. There's a lot of stuff that can be going on here.
Transient response. Harmonic distortion.
Lots of stuff. And also, exactly, it doesn't tell us anything about how well it handles different amounts of power either. It could be a speaker that anything over a couple of watts and the drivers start bottoming out. You wouldn't know.
Compressing or starts distorting.
So it is a useful metric in that we can use it to compare it to other speakers. It is not necessarily diagnostic in how that speaker sounds as a whole,
right,
or how it will sound in your room.
Yeah, what's key here is that he specified a frequency response graph,
right.
Because if he had just said if two speakers measured identically, would that mean they sound the same? Now, if this is a truly comprehensive set of measurements, so it is a full spinorama with thousands of measurement points at least two concentric spheres around both speakers, and in addition to that, it's power handling, so it's the full spinorama, it's power handling, it's distortion, it's transient response. If it's all the full comprehensive battery of measurements and two speakers measured identically, we would say the chances that you would hear a difference between those two speakers is really, really low. Right. But if all we have is one frequency response graph from two different speakers, that does not tell us the whole story. We need that comprehensive battery of measurements to get a high confidence level that these two speakers sound the same. So if not, why not? If two identical frequency response graphs aren't enough to tell us whether two speakers sound identical, it's because that's not enough information. It's just a smidgen of information. It's like saying these two cars have the same top speed, so they're the same car. No, there's a whole bunch of other things that could be different about two cars.
Is this a time when Rob made a car metaphor? And
right.
What is happening here? Is this a new year?
It is. But it's one metric. It's one metric, so two different things can have identical results in one metric. It doesn't mean they have identical results in all metrics. So that's why not. Does the same thing apply to subwoofers? I would argue,
more so than speakers for sure.
Yeah.
Because they're omnidirectional.
Yeah.
Number one.
Like the off-axis response, which is really important in speakers, that's not going to change very much between subwoofers. But transient response can still be different. Distortion can still be different. Power handling and how it responds to power and all that can all still be different. So
you can take three different subwoofers and get a very similar graph off of them, but they could be massively different sizes, in what they can handle. So you can take that speaker and overlay that graph and say, look, it's basically the same shape. There's almost no difference. Is it going to sound the same? I think if you put all three of those subwoofers in a room that the smallest of them could handle, they would all sound pretty close.
Yeah.
Which is why I don't feel like it makes any sense to overbuy subwoofers.
Sure.
The only reason you should overbuy a subwoofer is because you're thinking to yourself, I want to make sure that if I go to a bigger room, I still have enough power.
Yeah.
That is the only reason. I don't think sonically you notice as much of a difference with a subwoofer.
I would argue you can probably get away with fewer off-axis measurements for subwoofers. Yeah. That would be my argument. So I don't think you have to be take quite as many measurements as you do for a speaker to feel confident that two subwoofers sound the same. But again, frequency response alone would not be enough. There are still more metrics.
Okay. I clicked on the link, so now I have to go
back.
Arendal speakers seem to be the new hotness online. But are they overhyped or the real deal? Let me tell you something about the new hotness. They are always overhyped. Number one,
to some extent, sure,
that is almost always the case. It is very rarely the case that the thing that AVS is blowing up about is so
I mean, in
good.
this case, it's not even AVS. It's like all the YouTube home theater channels. They're all over because they sent them.
These are compression tweeters, right? Is that the deal?
Just a deep waveguide. It's not compression. They're not horn. They're just a deep. I mean, they're almost a horn, but they're just a deep waveguide. That's their visual identifier. So I mean, Audioholics did a pretty comprehensive review on these, and I do trust their results quite a bit. And there's nothing about the design of these that makes me go, oh, there's no way that could work. No, you got a nice waveguide that matches the diameter of the drivers that they're using. These are big speakers.
Yeah.
These are physically large speakers. Now, acoustically speaking, that's a very reasonable thing to do. It's one of the reasons they can play loud and low and have good power handling, because they're just using physics to their advantage. They have big cabinets. They are big. They're big speakers. I mean, it's funny because like the monoprice monolith speakers are kind of similar. There's a fair amount of similarities between the monoprice monolith speakers and the Encore speakers and the Arendal speakers in some of their design and their physical size. But yeah, I mean, there's nothing about if somebody gets these and says, yeah, I think they sound really good. Like, there's nothing where I would go, oh, they can't sound good. I mean, the design is completely reasonable. Well, I haven't heard them for myself, but going by the measurements that Audioholics took and that, I'm like, yeah, these look like a completely reasonable speaker, but just they're big. They're physically big.
They're very expensive. Are they very expensive?
They're not crazy expensive. They're not cheap. They're definitely not cheap.
1723 monitor is $2,400 a pair for a bookshelf. I mean, that's pretty expensive.
I mean, the SVS Ultras are getting up there now, so
rear ported.
Yep.
MTM design. Oh my God! Can you just not give? Ugh, I hate your website. Where's the specs? There's no specs.
Yeah, it's not super forthcoming on there, but yeah. That's my take anyway. I don't see any reason to like laud them way over anybody else's speakers. It's not like they're doing something at a price point nobody else is doing. It's nothing like that. But at the same time, I don't think they're like overhyped in the sense that if you get them, you're going to think you got ripped off. It's not like that, but yeah.
Yeah, they don't want you to know how big these things are when they put their diameters in centimeters. I'm like,
well, no, that's just because they're European.
Whatever. They're just trying to trick us. So, again, just to kind of reiterate what Rob was saying here, a lot of times people get very excited about stuff, and then that excitement builds, and then, as people get things, their expectations are very, very high. And rather than admit that their expectations were not met, they just hype themselves up to even believe them even more. And I see that all the time, and it's cyclical. And these, like Rob said, I have seen these before a couple times as they have come around. And this is a bookshelf speaker that plays well down into like 60 hertz or whatever. Sure. And that's something to be excited about, I guess. But do you have to have a massive speaker to do that? I'm not really sure that has to be the case. But for many people, there's something to be said for having a speaker that performs well, reviews well, and no one really owns that. You know what I mean?
They're relatively new, so
that's what I'm saying. So that's where this cachet comes from. When a speaker kind of catches fire like this, it becomes not only exciting to talk about them and to think about them and to and all that, but when you're one of the first ones to really own them, then suddenly people are online asking you for information about them. And what are you going to say? Oh yeah, I wasted my money. Totally. That doesn't happen, and it takes a while. And I just remember, and I go back to this because I reviewed a speaker that was like a Best Buy $30 speaker that everybody was just glowing over. And I remember the first time somebody online said, you know what, I just got some. They kind of sound like crap. And I got them and went, they're $30 speakers. They sound exactly like $30 speakers sound.
Or like the mica speakers that were all the rage on Amazon for some reason for a while. Like,
oh, right. I forgot about that. So I try not to get too worked up about that. But these speakers look to be just fine, and they'll probably stick around for quite some time.
Yeah.
They at least have a good product. They're not just hype; they're also a good product. But
I do agree with Tom's first blush in that they're a bit overhyped right now because, like I say, they're just not coming in and doing something at a price that no one else is doing. They're like, there are many other speakers at this price point that can do exactly what they do. So I don't have any beef with them. I also don't think they're worth like, oh, you got to get these.
I'm saying if you put them next to another bookshelf speaker that was $2,400 a pair, you'd probably go, I mean, they're both very good.
That's right.
The same. I think they're both very good speakers. I don't think you would look at one and go, oh my God, this is the one.
Yeah.
This totally destroys everything else.
Yeah.
It's just not the way it works. Terry, I didn't look at how long we've been going at this.
We're pretty close. This will probably be the last one, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I just want to mention that I guess we fixed Skype.
Oh yeah, we didn't crash out at 25 minutes in any case.
We didn't. Terry's theater is roughly 13 by 20 inches.
Yeah, I put the little marks in there.
I know, but it would be funny.
Come on now.
Inches, and the ceiling is under 8 feet. He's got an HSU VTF 3 Mark IV in the middle of his front wall and an SVS PC2000 in the middle of his back wall. He uses a Y splitter on one of the subwoofer outputs on his Marantz SR6011 receiver to feed both subs the exact same signal. And just a fun tangent, he actually has the crazy 3 receiver setup so you can have 6 overhead speakers. Yeah, he did that before.
Man after my own heart. Yes.
Before they came out with all those.
The ones that can do 6 natively.
6 speakers over there. Yeah, that's right. He adjusted the volume on each sub so that each one reads about 72 dB on its own and about 75 dB when they're combined. The initial results after running Odyssey via the editor app had the subwoofer output trim level set to -8. So by all accounts, he ought to have plenty of headroom, right? I mean, that's not really how that works, but that's fine.
No.
It's really
he hasn't maxed all the trim levels and volume dials out.
You had headroom before. I mean, you're fine. So he pretty much never goes all the way up to reference volume. Now, -10 is typical, maybe -5 for some movies, or Hulu and Disney Plus because whatever is going on over there. Now his question. Once in a while he'll hear a short slap sound. It only ever happens during the loudest bass, and it sounds bad. He isolated to his HSU VTF 3 Mark IV sub. Most of the time, everything sounds great. But if there's a really loud bass hit, his HSU sub makes this crazy, scary slap. I'm saying crazy. It makes this scary slap sound. Seems like maybe it's bottoming out. Maybe. Could it be anything else? Is it just that his HSU is 9 years old and starting to wear out? Should he get an SVS PB2000 while they're still on sale to replace it? That is does it sound like metal hitting metal? Because that's what.
Well, that's just
a bottom out. But
shouldn't. It absolutely should not.
Well, I would call HSU and say, listen,
yes,
dude, this is not a good sound. And they would 100% agree. Now, are they going to do anything about it? I don't know, but they may.
HSU is pretty good.
Aren't they servo? I thought
no, that's rhythmic. No, HSU is bash amplifiers. Is still on the bash amps, which are perfectly reasonable.
Right, right.
But there's no way a VTF 3 Mark IV should be bottoming out in these conditions in a 13 by 20 foot room. Absolutely not. And I have a suspicion because, he is saying it's a slap, not a clank. Right? When it bottoms out, it's like clank. And a slap, I'm like, do you have some of the port plugs plugged so that you went for the extra extension mode? Because I'm betting you went for the extra extension mode. Right. And this sound can happen when one of those port plugs isn't fully plugged. Because it goes like farts. Because the sound comes out.
Do you also have children that might have put Legos in there? Because that can also happen. I know. But I'm like,
this might be as simple as a port plug that isn't fully plugged anymore.
Well, I would immediately take out all the port plugs and then try to.
I would take out all the port plugs and I would put it into full bore mode because there's no need to put it into an extension mode in a 13 by 20 foot room. You will get plenty of 20 hertz and lower bass without it being in extension mode. I've come around to like not being a huge fan of using extension modes. Like the SPS subs have that too, right? You plug one of the ports out of the 3 and have this supposed extension mode. Like I'm not a huge fan of it. Like either run it ported or sealed. I'm not big on these extension mode things. That's there for the measurements. I don't think it's really there for real world performance. I'm not a huge fan of it. So that's what I would check, because that's easy enough to check. It's easy enough to take the port plug out of the thing. I'm betting he has the port plug.
Let me explain to our listeners really quick for just a second to kind of build on what Rob just said about port plugs. If you ever have the opportunity to like sit down at a brewery or a ale house or a restaurant with a speaker designer, like a real speaker designer from a real place, and you start getting them a little tipsy, start asking them about this stuff, okay? Because I guarantee you they've got some thoughts, and one of their thoughts is they make us do this.
Yeah,
they make us do these things so that we can get the measurements, or because other companies do it. Other companies plug ports, so we have to plug ports. I think plugging ports is dumb, and then and pointless. And yes, technically it can whatever. But in my home theater, I don't do it. I've never plugged a port, and I would bet that most of the designers would say stuff like that. And then some of these other things that well, how good is it to have a compression tweeter on a home theater speaker in what they say? Or I've seen speakers that have like 4 tweeters right next to each other. How is that a good design? And just let them go. Like, don't record them though, because so get fired. But it would be worth hearing it, because I bet that would be the case.
The other thing that's not out of the question, again, because I'm like, that's that slap sound that and the fact that there's no way this sub should be bottoming out.
It usually is a clang.
Yeah.
Most people would describe a bottoming out as a clang, because it sounds like metal on
or
metal.
even a thunk, because sometimes it's slightly damped, but it's like kunk. It's like it's not slap. And so it's not out of the question that the surround around the woofer like has just the smallest little gap in it at this point. Because I mean, if anything's going to wear out on a speaker, it's going to be the surround, the thing that just joins the driver to the edge around it. That's not out of the question.
I would take the grill off. I mean, I don't see any reason why you would hear anything from the driver hitting the grill. But I would take the grill off. I would examine the surround. I guess the other thing I was thinking is, what if there was like a crease in the surround, and it was like, as it was going in one direction, it was folding in and then popping back out.
Or maybe the dust cap.
The dust cap.
You have little fingers that push the dust cap in, and you haven't noticed because the grill is on.
Right, could be. I don't know. Yeah, there could be a couple of things going on. You would think that once the dust cap got popped back out, it would stay there. But we're talking about some pretty serious output.
Yeah. So I would.
There is no world in which I believe that your driver should be bottoming out.
No. I just don't see that. So I mean, I would take. I'm in my heart of hearts convinced he has it in extension mode. So I would take the port plug out. I would put it into just regular full bore 20 hertz, all the ports open mode. If that isn't it, I would call HSU. I would call HSU in a heartbeat, because they are really good on customer service. And
they would probably want to know.
They would want to know. Yeah.
This is something like I've had your subwoofer for 9 years, and it started making this weird noise. They're like, this is something we would like to know about.
Yep.
And now I don't know that they're going to be so interested in that they're going to replace your sub for free, or offer to ship it back to themselves so they can look at it.
Right.
But they are definitely going to be curious.
I mean, you could definitely, at the least, if it is a problem with the driver, you can get a replacement driver from HSU, and it will cost less than buying an entirely new sub from anybody. But that's of equivalent output. So yeah, those are my 2 things. Take it out of extension mode, remove that port plug, and if that doesn't fix it, call HSU.
And examine the whole driver.
Yeah.
All right, who else we got?
We have Mark, Chad, Chris, one of the Chris's, because there's another Chris right after that Chris. Chris H is after initial Chris. So there we go. That's on the list to take us into our second episode of 2022.
Ooh, exciting. All right. Let's see here. I want to thank our listeners of the week. I want to thank Chris for going to avrant.com and click on the Buy Us a Cup of Coffee link. And our 133 patrons over at patreon.com, including Terry, Bertrand, and Chris H.
That's right, Chris, the first Chris. Thank you very much for the PayPal donation, and patreon.com/AVRant podcast if you would like to sign up for an automatically monthly donation and haven't already done so. So a big thank you to our 133 patrons over there, Terry, Bertrand, and Chris H. Thank you for being 3 of them.
We want to thank Chris for talking us up to Seymour AV and Monoprice. No, he didn't say anything to Monoprice.
Didn't specifically say Monoprice, but Seymour AV for sure. Thank you, Chris, for talking us up to Chris at Seymour AV, because it was probably him.
So many, just Chris. It's like meta Chris.
That's right. It's all the Chris's this week.
Chris's all the way down. It's like Inception level Chris's. James for sending some photos that he dug up from Dolby that are better than the crap they have on their website right now.
Yeah, thank you, James.
And for notes of gratitude from Brandon, James, Martin, Eric, Terry, Andy, Chris, Chris, and Mark and Bertrand. So thank you for thanking us.
That's right. One more time. Those are Brandon, James, Martin, Eric, Terry, Andy, Chris, Mark, and Bertrand. Thank you all so much for those notes of gratitude and those notes of encouragement. We really do appreciate them. And a big thank you to everybody who continues to listen and send in your questions.
For AVRant, I'm Tom Andrew.
And I'm Rob H. Now stay in and listen to something.
I don't think I did the thing where we were supposed to say that. Did we say send your question? Did you say that?
Nope, you forgot at that time because I would have put the picture up, question@avrant.com. That's the email address.
Did you stop your recording already?
No, I hadn't already stopped it. We can throw this on at the end or whatever if you want to.
Maybe this will just be the end. Maybe this is how we'll end the podcast from now on.
It's the new outro.
The new outro is just me messing up and you just being so nice and patronizing about the whole thing that it just makes me feel even worse about myself.
Perfect.
Want your question answered? Send it to question@avrant.com. This is AVRant.
Now go out and listen to something.